Good morning, and welcome to the March 2025 board meeting of the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, more commonly known, and we prefer to call ourselves the MHRA. My name is Professor Anthony Harnden. This is my first board meeting held in public since I took on the role of chair in January this year. So only been here for a very short time, but very pleased to be delivering the board here in public today. As the new chair of the board, my strategic priorities are the following. I do believe that we need continuous improvement in our core business and performance, and embedding throughout risk proportionality in all our work. We want to have increasingly better surveillance and patient safety. Patient safety is the key reason for this organisation, and I am absolutely determined that patient safety will be at all times the front of what we do. Really want this to be a flourishing place to work and improve our staff engagement score. Our staff work very hard and very effectively, but I want them to really flourish within their roles. And I'm also very determined that we improve our public engagement and transparency. So we'll be looking at other ways of actually engaging with you as public, which will be thought about over the next few months. Can I just remind you that this is a board meeting held in public and is not a public meeting. There is a clear difference in that. It's also very important to explain to everybody online that this board is responsible predominantly for agreeing the strategic direction of the agency, maintaining high standards of corporate governance and scrutinising the performance of the MHRA, but that the board does not make any regulatory decisions on any medicines or medical devices. And this is because regulatory decisions on individual medical products are made by ministers at the Department of Health and Social Care on the recommendation of MHRA officials who are independent civil servants, with the additional independent advice from our expert advisory committees, such as the Commission on Human Medicines. Now, as far as today's meeting is concerned, I need to make you aware that we will be recording the meeting so that we can publish the video on our websites and provide the opportunity for as many people to observe the board and what it does. On that note, I'm pleased to say that 61 people have registered to observe our live meeting today, with 40 members of the public, all representatives of patients, groups and charities, 12 from industry and 5 from academia and clinical research. So I'd like to welcome you all and thank you very much for joining us. So with introductions in mind, so that you can get to know who is on the board, I'm going to go around the room and ask the board to introduce themselves. And I think what I'd like to do is start with June, who's sitting on my left, as it's her last meeting as CEO.
Well, thank you, and good morning. I'm June Rain. I'm the CEO of the MHRA.
Good morning. My name is Rebecca Jennings. I'm a Deputy Director in the Department for Health and Social Care Legal Advisors and a Legal Advisor to the MHRA.
Good morning. I'm Nicola Rose. I'm the Interim Executive Director for Science and Research.
Morning, Raj Long, Non-Executive Director.
Good morning, Julian Beach, Interim Exec Director for Healthcare Quality and Access.
Good morning, Mercy Jersingham, Non-Executive Director.
Good morning, Rachel Arundale, Interim Director for Partnerships.
Good morning, Hader Hussain, Non-Executive Director. Good morning, I'm Rose Braithwaite, Chief Finance Officer.
Hello, I'm Liz Booth, I'm Chief People Officer.
Morning, Graham Cook, Non-Executive Director.
Good morning, Paul Goldsmith, Non-Executive Director.
Good morning, I'm Claire Harrison, Chief Digital and Technology Officer.
Good morning, my name's Mandy Calvert and I'm a Non-Executive Director.
Morning, James Pound, Interim Executive Director, Innovation and Compliance.
Good morning, Junaid Bajwa, Non-Executive Director.
Good morning, Michael Whitehurst, Non-Executive Director.
Good morning, Catherine Glover, Deputy Director for Medicines Regulation and Prescribing at the Department of Health and Social Care.
Good morning, I'm Rachel Bosworth, Director of Communications and Engagement.
Good morning, I'm Natalie Richards, I'm the Head of the Executive Office.
Great, so now you've met the board. I think I'm really looking forward to today because I think we've got some very interesting items on the agenda for you all to listen to. And I think we're going to have some interesting discussions around some of those items. So let's just start with some of the formalities. I don't think, Natalie, there's been any apologies for the meeting today.
Just Carly McGurry.
Ah, okay. Carly's not here, who's head of governance. Unfortunately, she has been taken a little bit unwell this morning, so she's not able to come. Declarations of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest that people haven't declared that they feel? We are very strict about conflicts of interest. We do ask all board members to declare them and to set out for any items where there may be potential conflicts of interest. Are there any today? No? Okay, that's really good. Minutes from the last meeting. The last meeting that was held in public was in November, of which I think Graham was the chair. So Graham, can I just turn to you and ask if you're happy with the minutes or?
Yeah, no, happy with the recording.
Okay. Anybody else got any addition to those minutes? Okay, that's good. So let's come on to agency performance and CEO's report of current activities. And if I can turn to you, June, and ask you if you would like to highlight some of the achievements and activities of the agency over the last month. That'd be great.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Anthony, and I'm pleased to report how broad the activities and achievements have been across the agency over the last month. As you said just now, performance is front of mind, and I'd like to highlight that we've had very good performance towards eliminating the established medicines backlog, and as of yesterday, all new drugs are running to timelines and there are no backlogs, and I'm sure the board will want to record thanks and congratulations to the team in HQA led by Julian Beach. So that's a really important milestone as we look to the new leadership coming on board at the end of this month, that backlog has been eliminated. Those that are applying to us for new medicines and for established medicines will be able to look to predictable timelines for their determination. And I think that's a splendid place to be. I would like to highlight a couple of other things. New medicines and vaccines coming through, of which a new RSV vaccine was an important approval. And with our laboratory scientists working hard, we now have blood products made from UK blood donations. And that's a very significant milestone, having had 20 years without being able to reliably and confidently use this, but we now can. Turning to strengthening safety, we've published new guidelines in relation to digital mental health technologies, knowing how important these new products are for mental health diagnosis and management and rapid introduction into the NHS and into clinical use. So our guidelines are aimed at assuring not just safety but reliability and efficacy. The Yellow Card website is very much front of mind, and how we improve that interface with patients who've experienced a suspected adverse reaction or an adverse event. And I know that that again is front of mind, particularly as our discussions later on look at awareness of our Yellow Card scheme, that hotline to the agency. Particularly important at the moment as we look to the rapid uptake of the weight loss medicines, Wegovy and Ozempic, that our enforcement team are really on guard and out there looking for these supplies of counterfeit products. So a very active part of the agency's safety work. I'll touch on science, research and innovation. We were delighted to host our Minister, Karen Smith, last week to really begin to showcase some of the really important research for diagnostics, for assurance of safety, for the introduction of the flu vaccines for the coming winter, an enormous amount done to protect health from our laboratory experts. And we've also just worked with one of the London hospitals on a DNA sequencing tool for bacterial infections, really rapid diagnosis so that people have the right medicine in good time. Next week, we'll be launching our 7 centres of excellence in regulatory science and innovation, which will do a very great deal following all the work by partnerships to set up scientific partnerships so that regulation is based on best science. And bringing things together, our regulatory reform has been actively driving forward the new clinical trials regime, much simpler notifications coming through, and we've also got the point of care manufacture for those innovative products and new cancer vaccines, for example. None of this would be possible without the enormous efforts of our staff right across the agency, and I know the board will want to have this in mind as we discuss some of these important and very current topics. I would like to add that because the growth agenda has been so much front of mind, that the agency has got a really important place in this. Happy to take questions about that, but I'm sure colleagues will have noted the new funding for the AI airlock project, really important, another year there, and 3 pledges in relation to those innovative products being manufactured, the work we do hand in hand with NICE on scientific advice and coordinating our approvals. So there's a lot there, I know, Chair, but just really to display what the agency achieves through the efforts of all our staff. Thank you.
Thank you, June. I've been really impressed since I've been here with the breadth and scope of the work that's done in the agency, and certainly outlining really some of the really cutting-edge science that we're doing here is quite extraordinary, and I'm absolutely delighted that we have our performance now in such a good state. I think it was difficult after COVID with backlogs, but now we've clearly cleared those backlogs, and we can look to the future to really providing the industry and the public with the service that they deserve, and so really good news. Can I just open it up to the floor for any questions about June's report? Graham?
I mean, first of all, obviously to echo the change in performance, which is fantastic news. I thought I'd just pick up on the item on the report about health and safety. I mean, I think the board has been focused on this for a while, and there's a little comment in there about some of the learnings of events and what's being changed. So is there a little bit more we can say about what those learnings are and how the agency will be thinking differently going forward?
Well, thank you very much. The safety of our staff in all the things that we do right across laboratory science, across this Centre for the Innovation regulatory work and in real-world data is absolutely front of mind of the Executive Committee. And the, if you like, the improvement notice was responded to just before Christmas with an agreement from the Health and Safety Executive that lessons had been learned, and now is the opportunity, as we know at the board, to think about the best operational delivery of that health and safety function. So if you agree, Chair, I think it might be helpful to bring in Nicola Rose as head of our science and research, where the hub for our health and safety is run. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So part of the work that we've been doing to assure the Health and Safety Executive that we have an improved point of view of our auditing and our inspection has been to really rethink the process for how we monitor what we do on the science campus. And this has brought it much more in line with an approach that we use under our quality system. So we now have, I think, a much more robust system, not only for auditing, but also monitoring throughout the year. So I'm quite confident that we have a robust one now. We've actually brought some of our staff into this from the QA side, from our quality assurance side, where they're very used to doing audits for that, to now build them up to doing health and safety audits as well. So they bring a new perspective to it. And I think that consistency and that alignment is going to serve us well. It's something that we've just started, so it will take a little while to embed. But certainly working with the Health and Safety Executive, I think we'll be able to keep that on track. Thank you.
So the headline really is that the Health and Safety Executive felt that there were learnings in the area of management and leadership, and I'm absolutely confident that Nicola's work and her team have had learnt those lessons. Thank you.
And it sounds like that's being implemented at the moment, and so when do you expect that to be sort of fully implemented?
So we've initiated that, so that started towards the tail end of last year, calendar year. We will be reviewing this as we go through, and certainly we pick up on this when we have discussions with the Health and Safety Executive to make sure that we feel we're on track and they do as well. We will be, I think we've already started a couple of the audits actually under this new system anyway. So we will keep that under review because we like to make sure that we have sort of continual improvements. If we see areas that we think don't quite work as well as we'd hope to, then we can course correct with those.
Hader.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, June, for the excellent report, as always. I just wanted to make a note, really. I attended a tech show and tell last week with regards to AI prototyping and the use cases that we're building internally regarding efficiency. And I was very, very pleased to review all the AI use cases that were presented. Of particular interest was RAG use case, Retrieval Augmented Generation large language model, which used a store of our internal email responses to provide colleagues with drafts, massively reducing their workload from days to hours. It's these sorts of initiatives that will both improve our efficiency, but perhaps more importantly, show colleagues what is possible with new tools and drive continued innovation in our culture.
Well, can I thank Hader for actually highlighting this, because it is key to the efficiencies that we hope to gain. 3 really important areas that are forging ahead in clinical trials, in the pharmacopoeia and in healthcare quality and access. And once those are, if you like, embedding, we can't really see any aspect that won't benefit from these important tools in the way of speed, consistency, reliability. Also delighted, and I know you'll want to ask our Chief Digital and Technology Officer, at the way we've been working with colleagues internationally so that we, if you like, profit from other organisations like ours in the regulatory space who have the same goals. But I have to say the work here is inspiring them as well as we're learning from what other regulators are doing. And I'm sure there'll be a note to add on that as Claire's been leading the international work as well.
Claire, do you want to say a few lines about that?
Yeah, thank you, Hader and June. Yeah, a couple of things. We've partnered with smaller collaboration partners, and we also have our own internal capability, not always the capacity, so those have been really, really successful collaborations. And just some of the things that we've talked about, yourself, Chair, June, with the CEO reports, the organisation flourishing, for example, and government aims and ambitions around AI and that being at the centre of everything. backlogs some of the innovations in the scientific area and so on. So all of our prototypes, and I'm not just calling them prototypes now because we're starting to productionise them and embed them into our live ways of working, they run all the way across the regulatory life cycle. So you mentioned British Pharmacopoeia, clinical trials, assessments, safety and surveillance. So it was a brilliant couple of hours and lots of good feedback, which is lovely to hear. But importantly, it shows how we can collaborate, and we picked up more opportunities, and other people can reuse our work as well. So that saves time and money across the whole health sector.
Thank you, Claire. I mean, it's really encouraging to see that we're starting to embrace some small steps in AI, which I'm sure is the way to really improve the efficiency of this organisation in the future. So really, really good stuff. Michael, you had a comment.
Thank you, Chair. My question is really directed to Julian. I mean, it's brilliant that we've now dealt with the backlog, and tremendous thanks to all your colleagues that have done this. There is an inevitable question, though. How confident are you that that level of performance can be sustained? And what changes have we introduced to the operating model to give us that confidence?
Thank you, Michael, for the question. So really looking at it, we have been changing our business processes, looking at the how we do assessments, how we monitor the progress of going through the assessment, so management tracking, and looking at what we're calling a balanced scorecard. So right the way through, not just at the end of the pipe when we're having a decision, it's when do we expect to receive applications, working with industry to use good forecasting, and then looking at, as we go through it, assigning assessors, and then looking at when we ideally can have a RFI being granted. So as we go through, it's the process that we've changed, it's the oversight, and then finally it's the numbers of people that we have and appropriately trained. And so that's something that we continue to work to, and we're not at the end of that journey yet, but we are very much along the way in terms of making sure that we have clear sight of one of our main goals, which in the future will be 90-day initial assessment complete, and that's really fundamental to driving what we expect to see from the licensing area, and the KPIs and the monitoring that we will provide to board will be demonstrating that fact, and those are being collated on a weekly basis now to make sure we have very clear, transparent oversight.
Thank you. I'm assured with the work that you're doing, and of course we will continue to monitor progress. Thank you.
That's very helpful, and I think Michael's absolutely right. You know, we you know, achieving these performance targets is great, but sustaining them is really, really, you know, absolutely essential. And then being bolder with the target times is what I would like to see if we can achieve.
I was just going to say absolutely, and that's what we're focused as an organisation to do and work with industry and to develop the processes and the timelines going forward.
Did you have a comment on that? But
both actually, both the previous comments. First of all, the show and tell, and about sustainability, because actually this is where they came together, and what because I attended that same show and tell the other day, and what I was impressed with was how much it's being used in, you know, tackling things like our backlogs, but new ways of working as well, and the kind of the new delivery ways, but also about how much our staff have really embraced it. Once it's been demonstrated that it really is saving them huge amounts of time, and they can then concentrate on where their expertise is really needed, and that interaction with companies. So just to kind of link both of those things together, because this is going to be our new way of working. So I wanted to say that. I also just wanted to ask about being not an AI techie person, are hallucinations things that are not there? Is that what it means? Because that's the next thing about the airlock project and stuff. So I just wanted a clarification.
Claire, do you want to come back on that?
We can have an offline, otherwise we can talk for hours, but it's just unexpected results that you can't trace back to the data, but there are ways to mitigate those. We'll talk about jailbreaks as well, Mercy. But seriously, yeah, we're aware of those. It's an AI concept to mitigate for as well.
I've got an order now of people actually, because everyone's putting their hands up at once. So I think Mandy has been very patiently waiting, and then I think Paul was.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll echo. It's a great achievement to have eliminated the backlogs. The question I had was around the partnership section and around the notes on relationships with the EU and with the Access Consortium. What are our objectives with having those partnerships, and what impact is it going to have on access to medicines and patient safety? What are we looking for in those collaborations?
Shall I start, Chair? And thank you, Mandy, for highlighting this. And I know our colleague, Deputy Director or Interim Director of Partnerships, Rachel Arundel, will want to add to it. I'll start with access, and we know that one of the big disincentives of coming to the UK is its relatively small market share. So with access, we can work collaboratively and share work to deliver timely approvals, including innovative products, the Promise pathway, for a population of about 150, 160 million. Like-minded regulators, Canada, Australia, Singapore, Switzerland, means that we can align our assessments really rather easily, that we've got like minds, like assessors that are doing similar pieces of work. And that trust that has been developing over what's quite a long period now should enable rapid work sharing, a 5-way approval being the goal. So I think I would say the number one is access, as in the name. Number two, though, as we go upstream, is clinical trials. We know that for something like a pandemic, being able to, if you like, follow a virus, whatever, if we're looking across those jurisdictions, we can get data more quickly. And a really interesting project now to start working on protocols that will be acceptable right across those jurisdictions is going to enable that kind of rapid data generation. And there are a number of aspects to the strategies just coming out. We'll circulate it to the board, a refreshed strategy, where bilaterals will be possible on key areas of interest. We know Canada has a particular interest in health technology assessment, as we do too, that we can have bilaterals as well. So I've said a lot about access because it is a really important initiative. EU, now we're looking at refreshing our relationship. We had an excellent memorandum of understanding during COVID that enabled a lot of work, particularly on safety. But I know that our safety and surveillance team really benefited from that wider ability to generate and look at signals. And I do believe that that is an area where government will be interested in a closer alignment. But, Chair, if you'd like to get the latest from Rachel, I've given her some time to think.
Rachel.
Thank you for the question. The Access Consortium is a really important part of our work. It's the key partners that we work with are Swissmedic, the Australian regulator TGA, Therapeutic Goods Authority, Health Canada, and Singapore, so very important regulators, as well as the advantages that June mentions about work sharing and the efficiencies that can bring. There's the softer advantages of sharing different ideas and sharing expertises and building the relationships such that you can work together when different issues arise, such as the interface between the regulator and health technology assessment organisations, or even how one structures yourself as an agency to do the best work that you can. Those discussions are now starting between these organisations simply because we know each other and are used to working together, and I think that's good for us and it's good for global regulation. On the EMA, only to add as well that the MHRA remains a competent authority for Northern Ireland, so it's an important part of the European system, and it's important that we have that relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, that's really good. Raj, you wanted to say something?
Just to come in on this quickly, sorry. I think there's another added advantage to answer Mandy's question. Since we're out of the EU and the US are the biggest markets for global developers. So when they do a global development plan, that's what they tend to go after. These other 5 markets are the next market size they would typically judge, and they typically would go into tier 1 filing, so they will file first. So to June's point, if you're doing clinical trials here that are then going to be used across the 5, that's a truly valuable tool to have, because it will encourage these global developing plans to also then come to the UK, because it makes it easier. They can go for 1 protocol, 5 countries, implement it. And that also means then we'll have access to some of those innovative medicines earlier, because we're part of the next tier of commercial markets. So that was just, I just wanted to add in that to that point. But I also have another question. I don't know whether...
I mean, I think it's a really good point, and we want to encourage industry to bring their innovative products to the UK. I think it's really important, and to do that, we need to have, agile, risk proportionate regulation, and a lead into other international jurisdictions is an added bonus, really. So. I think moving forward, we're going to work really hard, and the first step in that hard work has been to get our performance sorted out,
exactly.
Which we have done. It's to sustain that performance, and it's to make those performance targets even more attractive for industry, because ultimately we want our patients to get the newest, most up-to-date medicines in a safe fashion, and the more that we can do to achieve that, the better, and international partnerships is certainly part of that equation.
So, sorry, I was just commenting on that. I had an additional question. It's a good segue to what we about bringing innovation. It's on item 1.5. Firstly, June and the team. It's so good to see tangible progress now in terms of metrics and stuff, and it's been a long journey, but it's just good to see that we are now seeing the return on investment on all of the hard work. But as Anthony says, we've got to maintain it. So really good report there, June. On item 1.5, mRNA cancer-based vaccines pertaining to personalized medicines. Understand that the guidelines are out, and by the end of March, I think you're going to get feedback. I think it'll be a good idea to bring that feedback to board at some point to see what are the challenges that both industry and for us to implement this whole area of personalized medicine and gene therapies, which is where it's coming. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is in a couple of meetings, or even the last meeting we had, we discussed the importance of also looking at how we regulate platforms. So the mRNA platform will be a platform. So more and more the thinking now, if you look externally, regulations are going to be brought at a platform level, then products of that platform will then be regulated in a slightly different way, because you're not having to validate the platform. So it's important, I think, to look, using this as an opportunity to look at both. And the last point I want to say is, again, I brought this up in another meeting, we were seen in a couple of months ago as leading. We published our guidelines early, we shared it publicly, and there were multiple regulators in this forum that I was in, and industry, and there was very positive feedback on how we were leading this. So we want to keep that momentum of leading on science that we talked about earlier for the agency, because market size is always going to be a bit difficult, but we can focus on science, and therefore being very rigorous and monitoring this space. And coming back to what you said, Chair, not make sure safety is there, it's risk proportionate, but very importantly, we have to be innovative and competitive in this area without compromising safety and efficacy.
Yeah, I think those are all really good points, Raj, absolutely. And, I hope that, as we discussed at the last meeting, you are going to be one of the non-exec directors that takes the lead in personalised medicines, and we need to work out how we're going to do that most effectively. Paul and then Julian.
Thank you. There's so much in this report to delve into. Very good stuff. I mean, one thing I'm pleased about is the dependency form in medicines review, and focus on the gabapentinoids and the sleep medicines, but actually it's broad. I know we've done work on opiates before, and antidepressants as well are often in the news, and the harm that comes from overuse, but also there's a risk of underuse as well if the understanding and messaging isn't correct. And these are things which unfold in really complex clinical environments. And my question is, how are we getting appropriate insight into what the clinical situations are and what are the various influences which cause the over or potentially underuse?
Well, thank you very much. And I know that this is a key priority for safety and surveillance at this moment. And I think that we've got a number of focal points. The first, of course, is engaging with patients, families, and charities, others who've got views. Some of these have been quite long-standing issues. The challenge for us as a regulator is keeping abreast of the latest evidence and striking a balance between access and safety. And that's never more challenging than in the area, as you say, of antidepressants. One of the things that I've struggled with through my professional career is when adverse effects are similar to the condition being treated and having to tease those out in a particular patient population. So step one has been engaging with those affected, but we're now moving to an expert group, particularly on antidepressants, but also on the dependency medicines, so that we can start to look at better risk communication, quantifying risk, but of course communicating it better. And I do think that Dr. Alison Cave will want to give an update to the board through probably the new committee structure, Chair, that you're proposing as to what better tools we can use in this space. Our regulatory information can be an important resource on which other tools are based. But really my message is it's very much top of the priority list for safety and surveillance at the moment.
Yeah, I think as our new chair of the Regulation and Safety Committee, Paul, I think this should be one of the items on your agenda, actually. I think it's really important. Julian.
Thank you. There's two comments. Firstly, I just wanted to place on record, which I omitted to do earlier, my full thanks and the agency's thanks to all the staff that have been involved with the backlog clearance. There's been a real team effort. Everybody has been working really super hard with that. And I just wanted to say, our thanks, my thanks to everybody who has been involved with that and record that in the minutes. And secondly, to Raj's point on platforms and other extensions of those definitions, that's something that we're actively working on, as we have said in previous boards, and we're working to make sure that we're both internationally aligned but equally setting that leadership pace, and that's something that we're active on at the moment.
Thank you, and I would like to also echo my thanks to your staff. I mean, I think that's it's been a monumental effort, and well done, June and Julian and James and everybody that was leading these very hard workers that have produced these great results. So really good performance figures. Rachel.
And the mission I made as well. The Access Consortium is actually about to issue its new strategy, so I will make sure that the board gets that when it's out. It's due very shortly and will be available on websites as well, and it will focus, as you would expect, on the Access Consortium's performance as well, in terms of hopefully increasing the number of applications that we get through that mechanism and increasing the speed and reliability of those processes. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much. Well, last point, Mercy.
Just one, let me sneak it in. Patient and public community, second meeting, the patient public community was held on the 12th of February, and I just wanted to ask Rachel, this is obviously quite a new way of engaging people, so and it's about informing people as well as getting some interaction back. Is that about right? And I just want to know how it was going and what the trajectory was for the future.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, as you've highlighted, Mercy, it is early days and the community's just had its second meeting. I think it's a very engaged group, and what we're trying to do is ensure that the meetings have a good amount of time to do justice to one particular topic, rather than filling the agenda with too many things and not being able to have that level of debate. So the aim is very much a two-way dialogue, both for us being able to explain particular areas, but most importantly to listen and to gain input. So we have just had meeting 2. The third meeting is planned in May, and one of the areas we're going to be looking at is a deep dive into progress with the risk and safety communication strategy.
Thanks. That's a really good point to end on, Mercy. What a full discussion we've had on your report, and I think it just shows, as I said at the beginning, the breadth of work and the interest of the engagement in the board on this has been really good. So I think it's well worth going 10 minutes over time for this this item, because it is always such an interesting item for discussion. So let's move on to the next item, which is Rose, really. It's the monthly financial and people performance of the MHRA to the end of month 10. And the board's asked for their reviews on the January financial performance and our latest people statistics. So over to you, Rose.
Thank you, Chair. At the end of January, we had a net underspend of almost 5 million compared to budget. And this has been driven by slightly higher income and underspends in non-pay operating costs. Our latest forecast for the year, though, indicates that we're going to be very close to our target of breaking even with a small surplus of 300,000. In reality, we will need a significant increase in expenditure to land the year so close to breaking even. The Executive Committee have been monitoring the risks around this, and to mitigate them have approved some additional areas of spend in the final 2 months of the year, which includes some spend in staff costs and to deliver increased functionality in the Safety Connect system as well. The paper also includes a couple of key performance areas. In the last couple of years, the Government Internal Audit Agency has given the agency a limited opinion on our internal control environment. To deal with this, we've developed a route to moderate programme, which is being managed by the Executive Committee, to enable the agency to move towards a moderate opinion this financial year for the annual report and accounts. We're currently delivering well with that, with 43 actions delivered, 35 due in later months, and 6 actions overdue. The overdue actions are all have revised delivery dates for which we have good confidence to be delivered by the 31st of March. The Audit Committee and Risk Committee yesterday looked at this in some detail, which I think gave some assurance that we are delivering that route to moderate. The second performance area in the paper is the Return to Green programme, which we've talked about quite a lot in the first segment of this meeting. But I don't know, Julian, if there was anything else you wanted to add to the Return to Green, which is looking at our backlogs and getting our statutory services back to timelines.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Chair. Just a few points to add. That the performance continues to track to the end of March for established medicines, as well as we've cleared the innovative medicines, so that we are looking for that. So licence applications are being granted or processed within statutory times from the 1st of September 2024. Variations and established medicines both happen to have 60 applications to go as of today's date, and we are then making sure that we are, as Michael mentioned, looking through at maintaining statutory compliance. We are looking at also the scientific advice and working through that area with the next degree of priority to make sure that those numbers are dropped as well, and we deliver the service that we would expect.
Thank you.
So happy to take any questions on any of the sections of the paper.
Can I just turn to Michael to make a comment about particularly about the audit?
Yes, Chair, very happy to do so. So we had a very good discussion yesterday about route to moderate. As a committee, and report will come next month, but we are assured at the quality and depth of work that has been done. Ultimately, though, the decision of whether we get a moderate assessment depends on our internal auditors. And the important thing that we emphasised yesterday is all the work that's been done is very well documented. It's making sure that internal audit have a comprehensive body of evidence that demonstrates the impact of those actions that have been taken, and very pleased that the executive are taking that away to do. The one observation that we would make is that this year, like with Return to Green, tremendous effort has been invested by the organisation in dealing with the issues that have arose. The bulk of that has been taken by Carly McGavin, who's not here today, our head of corporate, in giving leadership to that. That is not sustainable in the long term, and I was pleased to hear what Rose was saying. All of the areas that are in the route to moderate span all of executive responsibilities, and we need to get to a situation that it's not just a single individual in Carly giving leadership to this, it's shared across the whole executive. And again, I was pleased to have that assurance. May I ask two questions, if I can?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I just say, I do absolutely agree with you, Michael. I think it's I'm sure June would agree, it's a collective responsibility of the executive team, and that must be the way that we need to move forward. This can't be resting on one individual when it's the items are within different teams. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Thank you. Rose, I've got tremendous admiration for the way in which you manage the finances here. I don't think it's often that easy. I do note, and I'm sure you will get to an end year position that is where we should be, but there's a lot of volatility in our spend profile, and there has been challenge from this board before around optimism bias. I think when we've considered your report earlier in the year, there's been a degree of scepticism whether we could get to the projected spend, and yet again we find we can't. And I just would ask the question, are you confident that within the organisation, beyond your finance team, that we've got reliable financial management, business management in place? Because you can only do so much. A lot depends on the rest of the organisation.
Thanks, Michael. I think there are there are lessons we learnt each year from this exercise. So you'll recall that last year we actually over-programmed to allow for some of that optimism bias that goes into budgets and our ability to deliver to those financial forecasts. We also have a very strong business partnering team that works with each area of the business to try and make sure they understand their finances, because we recognise that they're specialists in other areas and not in finance. So we do quite a lot of hand-holding, particularly around the forecasting area. I think we're not quite there yet, I'd acknowledge that, and we need to do more work to give people the confidence about how they manage their finances. But I think we've got some excellent business partners in place now, working with the business, and I think that's showing year-on-year improvement. In particular, we now, working with HR as well, we've got a really good payroll forecast, which, if you think about it, that's over 60% of our spend, so that's a big bulk of it. And working with HR, we've got that really close each month now, and I think we've got a very good forecast for landing that year end. And the finance business partners, as I said, are working closely with different parts of the business to try and make their forecasts more robust. So working towards, I think, not a perfect solution yet.
I take assurance from that, and I know it's not easy. The one point I would say, though, is there's a comment in your report that the underspend on capital will be compensated for by additional capital available next year. That's fine, but given the state of public finances, I don't think these are going to be options that we're going to have available in the future. And I really, really do think that we absolutely be spot on in terms of spend profile for some of the capital investment, particularly around Regulatory Connect, because otherwise it's going to be lost money, because, as you know, we can't carry it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and agreed. We are very much working with the Regulatory Connect team to make sure that landing as close as possible to their capital allocation, in particular as they were awarded an extra $4 million this year from the department to keep progress in the final quarter of the year. So thank you.
Junaid.
No, Rose, thank you very much for the report. My question might either be to you or to Liz on this one. So it's around the vacancies piece, and specifically, if I was thinking about Anthony's comments earlier around some of the priorities as we think about quality and access, and also the digital side, we're still kind of on the double digits as it relates to vacancies. And I think we've been pretty static, especially if I look at HQA, and I'm concerned that both we've hit the milestones, but then we need to maintain the milestones, and so we still have a bit of a gap there with 47 vacancies at 10.6%. And on the digital side, it's such an important backbone of what we have, but we're still finding it hard to recruit. So I guess the question is there more that we could do? And we'll come to it later with the CERCES, but could the CERCES be a potential pipeline for us for talent, for engagement that we could engage with to try and counterbalance some of the vacancies that we have? And maybe not the only silver bullet, but are there other things that we're considering? Because I think we're quite static, especially on D&T and HQA vacancies, and we need to do more to sustain our performance.
Liz, do you want to come in there?
Yes, there's a lot in that question. You're right that our vacancy rates are significant. They tend to be covered by contingent workers and in other ways, and our strategy for the coming year is to try to reduce our dependency on contingent and other workers and move those people into our payroll, and you'll see we've had some success with that. Trying to look at the workforce planning assumptions that we need to take and implement those so that we can, particularly for digital, recruit people more easily. That's around adoption of what's called the DDAT pay framework, the digital pay framework, which is a civil service pay framework. It's also around some work that Claire's team and my team are doing jointly to look at the things that are stopping us from recruiting those digital specialists. And it's also about being opportunist, so that when opportunities arise, when there are changes in government, for example, we've got to be there on the front foot. And a piece of work that I'm doing, again, with Claire's team is around getting on the front foot for those machinery of government changes, so that we can slip in and hopefully recruit people of suitable calibre. When I look at our workforce profile, I'm worried not by the vacancy rate, because that's covered, but by the non-standard employment arrangements, if I can put it that way. So fixed term and contingent workers, it's greater than I would like. It's around about 16% at the moment, and it really ought to be around about 10%. So lots of work to do, and is being done to reduce that. I hope that helps a bit. There's a lot in your question, though, so.
No, I appreciate that. And with some of the changes that we've all been aware of over the last week, there may be opportunities for us to engage, especially in the areas of digital or indeed quality and access that we may wish to consider.
Yes, absolutely. And we have already started working on that.
Paul.
It's in response to your sort of second question. Why are people stressed?
When you look at the people survey, it's workload. We've to achieve the rather marvellous reductions in our backlog and eliminate our performance issues, we have put our colleagues under a great deal of pressure, and that shows in the people survey. You only need to look at the data around people feeling that their workload is unmanageable. So one of the items that we are pursuing in our strategic workforce plan is to try to right-size the bits of the organisation so that people don't feel that immense pressure of workload. And you'll see some of the data demonstrates that we're beginning to recruit more people into those areas permanently, and that's what matters. We're also looking at the way we train and develop people so that that's quicker, because one of the issues for us is the lead times to get people to competence. So looking at ways to enable that so that we don't find ourselves with only 2 or 3 people who can undertake an important piece of work, for example.
There's a difference between, so are we asking people to do too much, or are they perceiving that they have too much to do?
That's a good question that I can't really answer. People certainly perceive themselves across our organisation to have more work than they are able to undertake.
Graham, did you want to come in there?
No, I was going to ask about vacancies, but I think we've covered that.
Okay. I think a lot of this is about leadership. I think actually making sure that the staff are well supported, that they are not doing tasks which they don't have to do necessarily. So becoming more efficient. I mean, I think there's a lot of factors here really. And it's certainly one of my ambitions that that we eventually get to a place where actually people really, really, really enjoy working here, and actually, when you enjoy working in a place, you work much harder and much more efficiently, and feel a lot less stressed about it. So we'll work very hard at that. Graham, you wanted to come in about something else, did you? No. I've got a list of people here, Mercy, and I'm rather tempted to take 2 questions at once, actually, because otherwise I think we're going to go over. So, Julian and then Mandy. Julian.
Yeah, I really just wanted to come back to Junaid regarding the vacancy rate, and that it is right, it is there, and it is slower than I would like to rise. We have had some challenges in terms of filling some of those posts. So that's something that we are looking at and seeing how we can best address that, finding the right skills for the roles, and also then how do we then remunerate people, and other parts of it is a challenge, and that's something that we are seeing how we can address. And it really just to come back to the stress question from Paul as well. For me, it's really how do we provide that clear leadership, and as you say, Anthony, it's about prioritisation. It's about being very clear that right now, with the backlog that we have been lifting at the same time as trying to do future-looking work, there is a tension, and really one of the opportunities that as we go into 25 and 6 is to then look at less of the baggage and more about future-looking and how do we make sure that that's clear. But I would also say that staff are maintaining their motivation, they are being very committed, and they are in large part enjoying what they're doing, but it's more that there are pressures which we then need to help them and maintain how they can provide questions, open engagement, and visible kind of opportunities to see execs, non-execs, to then answer those questions. So it's really that prioritisation as well.
Yeah, and there's tremendous mission in this organisation, isn't there, with giving patients early access to innovative medicines and keeping them really safe. And that has a strong mission, and the majority of people that work here because they believe in that mission. And we can make it risk proportionate, we can lighten their workload, but at the same time make them work smarter and more sensibly. They'll be happier. Mandy.
Yeah, just a couple of things really. One is that I think we
last time from ADRC around the people survey, so workload is an issue. I think also the importance of really understanding whether the performance management processes really do go right throughout the organisation. I'm not sure with ODRC we are
convinced that that is working as well as it might do. And I think that that's an important first line of defence, if you see what I mean, in terms of what people's responsibilities are, to get that clarity, because that adds to what you're saying about do people know what their role is. I think the other piece on the vacancies table, and I notice what Liz was saying about many of those roles are covered by contingent workers. Given we've had the issue with IR35, and when we were doing the transformation, it was very hard to understand as a board member, who's permanent, who's temporary, who's on fixed-term contract. So I would like to see the reporting slightly different to give us a greater insight into understanding, are these vacancies mean there's nobody doing that role, or are they being covered by a contingent worker? Are they being covered by a contract? Because otherwise we don't really get a good view to take action on. So I think that transparency is really important, and I don't think and this might be me, but initially I see those vacancies that there's nobody in that role. So no wonder people are overworked, but that's not necessarily the case. And we've also had the issue with IR35, and those things seem to be linked. So if we could have better reporting around what is really nobody doing this job, or we're covering it, and because they then might be a source of bringing on people permanently into the organisation.
Claire, do you want to comment on that? Because I think a lot of the contracted workers are in the digital field, aren't they? So,
yeah, they are, but working on programmes such as Regulatory Connect and so on. So just a couple of things from me. With the vacancies, it is high. It's crept up a little bit more. At one point, though, it was 44% vacancy rate when I joined. And so we halved that, like I say, it's crept up again. The fundamentals, the reasons for it are around the pool of resources, so cyber and AI, and then that relates to pay, what we can offer as civil servants compared to, even with pensions included. And it tends to be a sort of younger group who aren't necessarily thinking about pensions, who are attracted to digital and technology roles. But Liz mentioned the workforce strategy, and that's one of the things that we're looking at there, leveraging government frameworks around pay, so we do have a better offer in that area. Also, the other significant reason for a vacancy rate this high is around location. So we can only recruit in London and South Mims, so that minimises the pool that we have access to as well. With contingent labour, most of the vacancies are covered by contingent rather than being just vacant. But again, I can't remember which board it was, but a couple of months ago I reported on that. So we've really reduced those figures as well. And so the pay costs for that have been reduced significantly by a lot. I won't go into figures here, I can do later if necessary. So it's going in the right trajectory, but it's always difficult to recruit, whether you're in civil service, private sector, and so on. And then lots of other things that we do as well. Apprenticeships internally and externally, people of a certain age, so not necessarily school leavers and university leavers who we can apply that apprenticeship levy to, and so on. So there's lots of different things that we're looking at in collaboration with Liz and others to get the vacancy rates reduced.
okay, that's really encouraging. Excellent. Can I just remind everybody about acronyms? Just have a note here about acronyms. I suspect it's about the IR35. So I just want, Rose, could you just give a quick definition of what IR35 is to the people watching?
Yes, it's a IR35 is a piece of legislation that is designed to ensure that people who work like a member of staff are paying the same tax as a member of staff, so that if we are outsourcing work, but the individuals are working more like a member of staff, they pay the same rate of tax. So that's what that is.
That's really helpful clarification. Mercy.
I'm glad you can squeeze me in. It's about turnover, really. So we often get the bit about the concern about lack of turnover. But my slight challenge is that obviously with transformation we lost a lot of experienced staff, and there was a lot of churn in the organisation, and we seem to have moved towards a more stable organisation where we're building up expertise, as we say, kind of the areas that we really do need people to stay for a bit longer and things. And this seems a bit of a blunt instrument, just, taking that statistic. So I just want to understand how useful is it, and given the context where in the last 4 or 5 years we've had a lot of turnover, are we now getting to a more stable position? And really, Liz, why should we be concerned?
Turnover is usually an early warning system, to be honest. I think that our current levels of turnover are partly as a result of, as you say, a churn 2 or 3 years ago that we're feeling the impact of now. I often say that the sweet spot for turnover is 8 to 10%, so we're not far off that. If our turnover was falling more rapidly, that's of much concern to me as the 15 or 16% that we've perhaps looked at in the past. But it's merely an early warning system, and I think it's an early warning system that says, don't worry at the moment, to my view.
So I think that sort of nicely concludes that discussion. We're now going to talk about Centres of Excellence in Regulatory Science and Innovation, with the acronym CERSI, but we'll keep calling it Centres of Excellence in Regulatory Science and Innovation for the benefit of those that are viewing. And Harriet's going to discuss this item, and the board are asked to advise the mechanisms to ensure the future sustainability of the programme, reflect on the opportunities that it presents, ongoing success, future potential, and to identify and discuss any absences from the centres that were funded this first round and how we can support those other areas. So, Harriet, nice to have you join us for this item, and I think you're going to do a little presentation.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Yes, so this is to provide an update on our Centres of Excellence for Regulatory Science and Innovation. This is a new endeavour for the agency, although there are other Centres of Excellence known globally. But this is an opportunity for us to go out into the broader community and gather evidence that will help inform and shape our future regulatory offering. We ran a programme, we ran a funded competition in partnership with the Office of Life Sciences, with Innovate UK to kind of provide the infrastructure for the funding, and with most recently the MRC, so the Medical Research Council. And the intention, as I say, was to set up centres of excellence on a variety of themes that are increasingly important for us as a regulator in this space, thinking about future innovation and current challenges that we are addressing in our daily work to ensure that we have opportunity to be supportive of innovation as it comes to us. So 7 centres have been awarded. They began in earnest at the end of January. This first go at this, our first foray into this area, we have 12 months of funding to begin with. So each of those projects will have received up to £1 million of funding, and they will then run for the remainder of their 12 months, feeding into areas ranging from digital transformation of medicines development and manufacturing, transformative digital health and AI, in silico clinical trials approaches. So really interesting topics that are important for the work we are carrying out on a daily basis. And these centres have hopefully time and opportunity to delve into the detail more thoroughly and think about how we can best address some of these challenges and think about our offerings in future. So as I say, the project started in January and we've already had good engagement. There was a webinar, for example, yesterday to launch the In Silico project to talk through their plans for the coming year. We have a launch event scheduled for next Tuesday, so 25th of March, with the opportunity for the CERSI to come together, share their progress to this point and their plans for the year, and then think about how we as an agency will engage with them and across the wider health ecosystem as well to really benefit from their endeavours. So I'm delighted that we've reached this point. A lot of work has got us to this point, and we're now looking to engage and see how they progress.
It's a really exciting programme, really
is.
exciting, and well done for getting it to this stage. And I think it's going to make some really interesting contributions to the work we do as a regulator and the science behind it. Shall I open up the floor to questions? Raj.
Really great progress, Harriet, and we're delighted with you because this has been in discussion for a while as well. Oh, sorry. I said great progress, delighted with you because this has been in progress for a while. You're now at a very tangible stage for these, right? Because you're looking for future direction, you're looking for sustainability through extra funding. I think one of the things that could help these projects, as well as leverage it for what we are trying to do in the agency, because that's where the sweet spot would be, whether we bring long-lasting impact from this to inform some of the areas we're trying to do. And I saw one that stood out, but I think there are others here that we should look at, is, for example, your advanced therapies, the second one. That has a direct link to the earlier discussion we had on personalized medicines. And so it'll be good, and I hope you're also involved in that, Julian, because of the innovation, because leading the ILAC piece around it. So that you're going to collect multiple dots here. I think really important to start that thinking now on how. So before you came in, we discussed personalized medicines as something, and we're linking to it. I would say it'll help you deliver on 4.1 and 4.3 of your ask, which is if you go with a sustainable body of work, you are likely to get more funding beyond this cycle. So if you go somewhere like personalized medicines, you're going to have a project plan. We're going to have our own strategy for that within, and we can inform and also learn from this group and test out some of the things that we need to do. It'll also help you get more funding then, because anyone who's going to fund this for the second stage will actually see there is a long-term plan, a mid to long-term plan and body of work. But most importantly, I think we can have impact. And I would strongly encourage on all of these CERSIs to see what are the innovative things we're doing in the agency, and can this group benefit from what we're trying to do, and vice versa. So together, we achieve a much stronger outcome and impact. So certainly a call out that, the advanced therapies piece, which we discussed earlier, Julian, I think needs to be connected with this so that we see. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Raj. Just to address that, Julian is involved and has already been in conversation, and it's my omission that he's not included on this page, so my apologies for that, and I will be amending. But that is absolutely the intention, to align our priorities cross-agency and making sure that we have that two-way discussion to ensure that what comes out in this first phase and beyond then is really pertinent to what we're working on.
And just to finish, maybe at the right time to get some feedback on how we are connecting this to come back to board would be helpful. Just whenever you deem it as the right time.
Thanks, Harriet. Before I come on to Paul and Graham, Junaid and Michael, can I just ask you about outputs, Harriet? I mean, that's going to be absolutely key, isn't it? What are we expecting in terms of outputs?
Yes, it is certainly going to be key. It will slightly depend across project based on the maturity of the technology being looked at, and also how sort of far our own thinking has progressed. There will be, in some instances, there's sort of quite preliminary work that needs to take place to understand and grapple with the real challenges faced within the space. In others, where there is more known already and more progress that has already been made, there will be white papers, there will be publications, there will be documentation that looks at what they've discussed and achieved through the year. And what we are intending to do is to make sure our engagement across the year is in step, so that we're not just waiting for a shiny publication in 3 years' time, but that we're actually receiving an iterative understanding of how they're progressing. So it will be slightly dependent, but yes, we are keen to monitor and review as they progress.
Great. Okay, that's very encouraging. Paul.
I think my sort of question really builds on that, and it's sort of understanding or having clarity in where CERSI sit within MHRA and what is driving the activity, and sort of how do we ensure we've got appropriate performance and alignment, because it's like with the science strategy. The science strategy should be supporting better regulation and performance, not doing interesting science, which historically we've done. And my concern here is, for me, logically, that the word science regulation, it sort of should sit within science and support it, and not become an academically funded, going off and do some interesting things. And so I'm seeking assurance that that is thought through.
Yes, so there are several levels of that sort of monitoring and review process. So we've worked closely with Innovate UK and with the Medicines Research Council, and they will be looking at it from the sort of funding perspective. Have you done what you've said you're going to in terms of how the projects have been set up? Alongside that, we are then very much looking at the application of the findings and how they feed into our daily work, and really focusing on that application. So we are, and we are meeting to discuss across the sponsors of the different projects how we build an effective monitoring sort of process. It's going to be slightly different for each of the projects depending on what they're offering and their focus is, but very much making sure that it's not for interest's sake, but it is feeding into that application. And I did just want to, related, I think, touch on the question around the pipeline and people, and whether or not the CERSIs would provide a sort of conduit for people into the agency, because I do think they will stand an opportunity to raise awareness for the work that we are doing, the sorts of areas of innovation that are important for us. It is an engagement with a broader community that does raise that profile and the understanding of the application, not just the interesting questions, but actually what they then mean right through to the patient. So I think it will be a vehicle for both things, and that we can see it as that. But we need to be intentional about that. I do agree.
But Paul's absolutely right. Laser focus on the relevance to the regulatory work that we do within the agency. It's absolutely really, really important. I'm going to take Graham and Junaid, and then move on. Graham.
I mean, just to echo, I'm delighted to see the progress of this, and it's been coming for a while, but I think it's really, really great to hear. You would talk about the funding. I mean, clearly, as we've discussed before, we need to get funding in place now for the end of the year so that we can get good quality people in posts and be making that case before the outputs come. It's going to be critical, as we've heard, to have those outputs measured, but we need to be clear that it's not going to be about publications and citations, but about impacts. And I think internally we need to be capturing those impacts in the organisation and making sure that the CERSIs, if you forgive me, Chair, will be thinking about capturing those as part of their process too. I was delighted to hear you've got the Minister coming on Tuesday, and I think we need to be looking at the government agencies to lean into this at the moment, and it's clearly aligned to where the government wants to be going. You asked a question about what's missing or how you think about that. I think the one thing that I think may be in there, but it wasn't obvious to me, was about the sort of science of using real-world data and how that's captured within. So maybe that is within digital health. It'd be useful to hear that. And my other question was really about alignment with other nations' CERSIs. If there's any updates as to how the FDA are thinking about that. I noticed they publish a list of priorities of areas they would like to see work in, and I think that would be something for the agency. I'm assuming you look at that. Clearly there are some alignments, and so there's questions about to what extent that's could be done collaboratively or doesn't need to be done. We don't want to duplicate work, but also maybe think about putting out a list like that the agency would like to see.
Thank you, Graham. So covered quite a few things there. To start with the real-world data, it will be covered to a degree in some of the projects where the digital and the AI sort of there is overlap. However, we do think there probably is scope for us a focused data science programme. We will be monitoring and reviewing the progress of these projects to begin with, but we're also looking to identify other areas that would benefit from this sort of focus. So the next stage of this project isn't necessarily a continuation of what's already happening, but a look to build out. And I think data science needs to be certainly within that mix. In terms of alignment and understanding of what's happening broadly on a global level, I would absolutely agree. And I think we're in the early stages of understanding how we can usefully contribute to that, and as you say, not to duplicate, but also to sort of enhance. So I think there is room for more of that discussion to happen once we're clear on what's coming from our offering at this stage. And then in terms of the sort of sustainability and how we move forwards, a lot of the impact is going to build over time, and 12 months really isn't a very long period to gain good understanding of the potential of these projects at this stage. So making sure that we understand that timeline and that requirement to kind of give enough time to demonstrate its worth, I think is going to be really important, and we must be building that into the funding, thinking about the future funding opportunities, and that then aligning with and sort of enhancing the global offering, I think is going to be really valuable.
Harriet, this is attracting an awful lot of interest. A lot of people here want to ask questions, but what I'm going to do is take the questions in sequential order and then get you to answer at the end, if that's all right. Otherwise, we're going to run over time. So, Junaid, first of all.
So, Harriet, I'm a big fan, as you know, and we've discussed this previously. So I think some of my questions have already been answered, but I think it comes down, from my reflection, around three things. So theory, practice, and context. So how do we move from theory into practice, i.e. we know what the context is of the kind of demands coming into the agency. We have to connect that back into the work that this group is doing. And from a context perspective, I would be curious, FDA's been running these for about 10, 15 years, if not longer. What have their lessons been and how are we adapting? Their context is very distinct to our context, but the more we could kind of get from theory to practice to delivery in the scope of work that we're really prioritizing and interested in, the more successful this will be. And I'm sure that there'll even be synergies between the CERCs that we should try and force and collision with in order to maximize the output too. So great work. Happy to engage further if needed.
Michael.
Really great work. Just two observations from me. One of the questions you asked about long-term sustainability, I would say, given the current climate we are with public finances, adopting a bit more of a commercial model. So I see this as seed corn that needs to have a return on investment. So you've got to actually think in that way if you're going to get sustainability moving forward. And I think we need to be really clear what that return on investment is. Building on what Graham had said, I recall that we were trying to get a CERC around real-world data, and we weren't successful for a range of reasons. I think there's a bigger issue for me here beyond real-world data, and it relates to some of the things that the government have been saying, and it relates to the fact that we have an ecosystem, Paul's point that is made numerous times, that is fragmented, and I'm really interested in how data is used, because we draw on data, NICE draws on data, a whole range of organisations, but what we see along the way is I'm not sure data sharing is as good as we think it is. And I'd be really interested to see the application of data to improve regulation, to improve a whole range of different issues, to make the NHS more effective. And we're only part of that, but I think it needs a bit of leadership in that space.
Do you want to answer those 2 points, and then I'll come on to Claire and James?
Thank you. Yes, some really interesting points. In terms of, Junaid, your theory, practice and context, I think it comes back to our engagement as projects progress, but we do need to a degree, manage expectation for how involved we can be. We are obviously limited in terms of resourcing to feed into this, so getting very efficient in how we're sharing and contributing to that work is going to be part of our challenge. In terms of FDA learnings, so they've been, it's a more mature programme, and it's crucially entirely funded through the FDA, so it really answers that sustainability question, and I think that is part of the opportunity is to emphasise the need to go beyond this one-year funding cycle to move to being able to sort of commit more longer-term funding, but to really build that sustainability as an evidence base, I think is super important. But yes, plenty to learn from their experiences ahead of us. Michael, in terms of your questions, yes, I absolutely agree. We're obviously focusing a great deal on our information sharing across agency, and particularly our system alignment with NICE and devolved governments and with the NHS partners as well. It's a work in progress, and certainly anything further we can do to gather evidence to guide how that would be most effective, I think will be really important. But we can work with the current projects, but also think about where there might be further opportunity.
Thanks. So Claire and James, bearing in mind, James, that we want to get onto your innovative pathways, so can we both be brief? That'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Two comments from me. So just on the data piece, we have the data strategy that was published last year that Alison and I co-authored, and with this and other relevant things in mind, so that will be a vehicle to support this work, and this work will align with that too. Going right back to a comment by Raj several minutes ago, just that two-way. So Harriet and I, and partnerships indeed, work closely together, and we are doing on this as well, but also some of the CERSI representatives attended our show and tell. So all of that is happening in the background. It wouldn't make sense to have me listed here as a sponsor because they are specific projects with specific outcomes, but our work, whether it's AI, there are other types of innovation in town, data sharing and so on, runs across all of these. So they'll be linked up rather than in silos, and aligned with our plans and work around AI and everything else that's relevant.
Thanks, James.
I'll just be brief. I think my comments are, it's important, I think, to see the CERSI work within that wider architecture of how we as a regulator can enable innovation. So we have innovation pathways following this, but also our wider scientific advice. And I think for the areas I've been involved in this programme, what I would expect to see as a regulator is things like potentially some guidance or best practice, new standards potentially, identifying regulatory change, training. I think those are the kind of tangible outputs from regulatory science activity that then better arm us as the regulator to go ahead and then regulate for these new and innovative products coming through.
Thank you. So, well done, Harriet. Really, really good progress. Attracts a lot of interest and comments from the board, and keep it focused on the applicability to the MHRA. That's the actual central theme. But thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Good. So that was a really good discussion. So now we come on to another very interesting item, I think, which is innovative pathways for medicines and medical devices, known as IDAP for the devices and ILAP for the medicines. We're going to note the progress and reflect on the innovative pathways in light of the changing landscape and opportunities highlighted. And Louise Knowles is going to join us for this item. So welcome, Louise. And I'm going to hand over to you and James, who are going to lead this item.
I'll probably just say a couple of words, then I'll pass to Louise, who'll give a far more eloquent, detailed summary. I think the points I would make are our innovation pathways are key for a number of reasons. First and foremost, to safely accelerate new medicines getting to patients in the UK. But alongside that, also making the UK one of the best places in the world to develop those products. And again, that taken in the wider context of all the work we're doing to encourage innovation in the UK. And June cited the new clinical trials regulations as another example of that. I think we've got some good success stories to come out of this paper in terms of the refresh of ILAP and the success of the pilot for IDAPs on medicines and medical devices, respectively. And I think what these pathways illustrate very clearly is the critical importance of collaboration across the healthcare sector, working together to deliver innovation. And I think it's very important in light of recent announcements made at the beginning of this week. So I think we're now thinking of further next steps, and I think an important thing is that we're ambitious about what we do with these programmes in the future, and we're very much looking forward to input from the board. So I'll pass to Louise at that point.
Thank you. Great. Well, lovely to be here. And Louise Knowles, I'm the Deputy Director for the Innovation Accelerator here. Really positive progress made on both of these access pathways. So if I start with the Innovative Licensing and Access Pathway, ILAP for short, which focuses on medicines. So that's now been relaunched and refreshed with a new approach. At the end of January this year, the new approach, guidance and details of what will be on offer through that pathway were published. Very much working completely collaboratively with our partners across the system to implement some really important changes in response to some of the lessons learned from the previous iteration of ILAP, address some of the challenges and opportunities highlighted in the Pro-Innovation Regulation of Technologies Review, and of course feedback from our stakeholders and our system. So I just wanted to highlight some of the key changes. So I think there's many, but I'll highlight some key ones. I think really importantly, for the first time, one, we have colleagues in Northern Ireland involved, so it's a genuine UK-wide offer, and we now have the inclusion of the NHS as the payers as formal members of the pathway. It ensures that, therefore, that products entering the pathway benefit from the early stages of development, from engagement not just with us as the regulator, but with the health technology assessment bodies across the UK and essentially the payers, the commissioners, right from the early stages, a genuinely unique offer. We've also refreshed the process to ensure that we can deliver to published timelines without delay, to enable people that might apply to the pathway to plan effectively. We've refined the criteria to address some of the points raised previously, and the idea that we can really focus on a key number of products where we can work with the developers to really benefit from that bespoke service that it provides. We've also completely refreshed what's on offer through the pathway, so focusing on what we're calling a core set of deliverable services, aiming to speed up clinical development through joint scientific advice, but also with our colleagues in the National Institute of Health and Care Research to help support the speedy delivery, speedy setup and delivery of clinical trials in the UK, and of course carrying on with the clinical practice research data link support for rapid recruitment. For access, the ILAP Access Forum has been carried over. That's been really successful in the first iteration, so we're carrying on with that. And we've also got a whole new area around the adoption piece. So colleagues in the NHS have been working, will be working with products entering ILAP to think about operational planning and system preparedness for the potential introduction of these medicines into standard patient care across the UK. So, and they're looking at how you can develop that UK-wide adoption strategy. So really, really exciting. So we're very much on track. The new application portal will open to new applications at the end of this month. And as we go forward, we are committed, and we've said this, to continuous improvement. So we'll be looking to further enhance and build on this offer as it gets established. So then if I move on to the equivalent for devices, the Innovative Devices Access Pathway Pilot. So this is a pilot, and the intention of it is to test the pathway for devices and its key components to generate lessons learned for potential for what that might mean for a full pathway or even the wider innovative devices landscape. There were 8 products selected for the pilot last year, and we've been working with them over the last year. All of the pilot tools have been tested with at least one company. I can't go into all the details, but that will include things such as a system navigation tool, so a single point of contact to help companies understand evidence-based requirements and issues they might need to be aware of. A expedited clinical investigations review, so reviewing clinical investigations in 30 days as opposed to the statutory 60-day target, so working through that. Working with UK-approved bodies to do a structured review tool to help provide some high-level feedback to the manufacturers to help them strengthen their technical files when they might submit to the approved bodies for approval. We're also building on the flexibilities that exist to make use of a thing called the Unmet Clinical Need Authorisation to enable using the flexibilities that exist to enable patient access to either non-CE or non-UKCA marked medical devices in Great Britain. So we're doing that as part of the pilot as well. And of course, lots of joint scientific advice going on. at the moment, so so the pilot itself is due to end at the end of March. So we're working on with the companies till then and working what happens beyond that. And of course, really focusing now on the evaluation of the pilot so we can capture those lessons learnt. As I say, so that's where we're at with those two in terms of progress. We're, as I say, really focusing on proceeding with the relaunch of ILAP and the completion and evaluation of the IDAP pilot. We know, obviously, there's strong interest in innovative access pathways and that system-wide alignment, as James talked to. So, what we've been trying to do with both of these pathways is to achieve that alignment to enhance our ability to bring these products to market safely and quickly. And as we say, as we move forward, we're cognizant of that changing landscape. So we know there is, certainly from an innovation perspective, increasing convergence in innovation that blur the traditional boundaries of medicines and devices that we need to think about very carefully. And of course, at the same time, there are other things ongoing where we are always looking to work more closely with our system partners to remove delays. So, as James alluded to, the announcements just this week, as an example, improving alignment between between MHRA decisions and NICE guidance publication in terms of medicines. And you'll also be aware, as part of our medical devices regulatory reform roadmap, we're actively working on the policy development for early access and innovation for devices, which will come out later this year. So there's a lot going on here that we need to factor in. So we'll be working over the course of the next few months with our partners, with other colleagues across the agency, to take all of this into consideration and see how these should be developed as we go forward, and explore more opportunities to further streamline access to innovative pathways for all sorts of healthcare products.
Thank you. That's a really, really comprehensive walkthrough. Well, can I just ask you a very simple question? What's your ambition about the scale of this?
Yeah, it's a very hard one to answer. If I demanded for it, it'd be lovely to do this sort of thing for absolutely everything. Yeah. And I think what we have to always find the balance is these highly bespoke services are, they take a lot. They're quite resource intensive. Yes. You have to really think about what are the products that you want to support in this way. But also, I think really important that the lessons learnt, some of what we're picking up could be embedded as business as usual for a much broader scope of products. So I think we need to do that as part of the evaluation. The work we want to do over the next sort of few months is really work through what is scalable, but also what can be embedded as business as usual. But where do we need to really think about? As I say, there are some really exciting innovations that could really step change patient care, and it's those sorts of things we as a system need to kind of really get behind. So we need to think about that balance very carefully.
Well, clearly we need the resource to be able to do it, don't we?
Yes.
And,
yes.
But then industry may want to provide that resource to get a bespoke, pathway such as this for their innovative products, which are going to benefit patients. Yeah. So I think that must be a way forward.
Yeah, I think if we can demonstrate the value, then
value added.
The value added, absolutely. I mean, you guys all know how expensive it is to develop a new medicine. So anything that we can do in that space, I think, for sure.
Actually, in terms of the development cost, it will be a fraction of their cost. Yes. So I think it will be well worthwhile. Does anybody in the board have any questions about this, Mandy?
Really encouraging to see where we've got to with this. I think this might be a real game changer.
Oh, your microphone, Mandy.
Always have done for the agency in terms of what it can offer, the advantages of working with our HTA partners and with commissioning. So I think really understanding what the true cost is of this service, to give that, I think we need a much better handle on that. I think we also need to understand the value that it gives to innovators,
yes,
which isn't the same as the cost. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to really be very think in a business way about that.
Yes.
And bringing together the things like the data and the therapy side, which is bringing IDAP and ILAP closer together. That's going to be a potential game changer. So this is a key innovation pathway. It's not a science technology, but as a regulator, this is what could make us a very attractive place to be. And I think we need to understand better the value to the industry and to patients. And so coming back like the sources, what is the impact of this? And I think we need to be, I would like to see that brought to the board, and we can help us make priorities on investment decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good point. As part of the pilots, have we got feedback from industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got feedback from industry, certainly on the device pilot. And we work as part of the evaluation. We're looking at all of these things for that. We obviously, where it comes to the innovative licensing access path, we have some data from the original iteration, but obviously the new one, it hasn't. So we haven't got all of that value. So we have. I can speculate, but I don't have that data yet to say like is this going to truly deliver what we say. So I'd say generally think there will be, and we've got a lot of learnings from the original version that we've built on. So we need to really get that up and running and get that stakeholder feedback. We will have an industry advisory group being set up to support the programme. So we'll be able to use that to help get some very quick feedback as we go. And we're developing impact measures and metrics to make sure we support that, and we will be measuring that as we go.
I think we probably do have enough data. We need to extrapolate, and any forecast is an extrapolation. And so, it might not be 100% right, but as we do risk-based decision making, I think we have to demonstrate that. So yeah. I would encourage us to use the data we have. It might not be 100% right, but it's going to give an indication.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to continually look at this and write reports on how this benefits industry and makes it attractive. James.
Sure, I'm just going to add to Louise's comments. I think in the longer term we have to make sure we have a sustainable innovation kind of gateway to the agency, and how those pathways are funded through charges and fees, etc. And I think we build and use the relaunch and the refresh to start to generate some more of that data. Similarly, how you create KPIs around the process so we can make sure that we're delivering efficiently and effectively. But to me, the ultimate outcome here is about taking innovation to patients more rapidly. So that's the ultimate measure we need to be seeing. Is it actually changing the situation on the ground for patients? I also think something that's important is we've got a great set of partners who are working together on both the medicines and devices pathways. So we've talked around NICE and other bodies, MHRA, for example. I think we should be considering in the future who are the other regulators we might need to be engaging with. So we've seen in the announcements at the beginning of the week where we're seeing things like drone technologies, for example. So there's a whole different constituency of regulators who might need to engage with in the future. And I think that's something we're very keen to explore over time. Who are the other parts of the system that we need to work with going forward?
Very helpful. Raj.
I think the question is, how does it benefit industry and patients? Because if you benefit industry, it means access to patients. And they go hand in hand. And I wonder, James, whether we should look to see, we have a number of examples where innovative products, especially in the dementia space, that haven't got to patients for multiple reasons. And I come back to what I've said previously at board. We can have the most wonderful science in the agency and from the developer and do our safety and efficacy assessment. But if the product doesn't get to a patient, then in some ways we have all collectively failed, not just MHRA, but the whole system. And I think the whole idea of innovative products, which is what this is designed for, is to get to patients. And the challenge we have there is, and James, you touched on it, and it's in the last piece there, how do we streamline access to innovative pathways, right? We need to look at some examples of why that hasn't happened. It's not because nobody wants to make it happen. It's the reality of the situation we're in. And we're in a very unique position here in the UK. Our ecosystem starts with the NHS. We do clinical trials in the NHS setting, and we end with the NHS dispensing. So they're decision makers at the start and at the end, and they sandwich the whole process. So then we have HDA in the middle. So I would make a really strong plea to start looking to see how do we now, as we are growing our expertise and getting there, how can we in the current climate work differently It doesn't mean more resource. It doesn't just work differently in how we bring. And for me, the sweet spot is we do efficacy, safety and efficacy, and the HTDA does effectiveness. They both overlap in the middle a little bit if you really look at how the evaluations are done. And maybe that's an opportunity, if you get a chance, James, to look deeper into it to see how do we work early. And then the last point I want to make is when we are reviewing this through ILAP, because these are all for the innovation, we have to consider how is the product given at the point of care. Because the point of care determines whether the patient's going to get it. Is it in tertiary care you have to give this? Is it in secondary care? Or is it in primary care? That has to come earlier in the design of development. If we can do that earlier, you're going to get earlier insight. And that way you're helping our HTA, NHS early to sort of determine, is this going to work? What else do we need to do? We don't think of it after licensure. We start thinking about it as you shape in development because our ecosystem is so unique. So I would really make a plea from a board perspective, and I'm happy to work because I'm doing quite a bit of reading up on this, to really come up with a way where we can try and work differently. And in the current climate where there's change, there's always some opportunities too, but also challenges. So I want to make that.
Thank you, Raj. James, do you want to come back on that?
I mean, I'll bring in Louise in a second if that's okay, but I think we're completely in the same space around how do we get that early engagement for the health technology assessment, but also, as Louise set out, in the refreshed ILAP, it's brought the national health bodies in as well. And it's, to your point, both in terms of them figuring out the impact that would have on the care pathway, but also the institutional readiness. If I'm going to be administering a cell therapy, what kind of infrastructure do I need to scale that across the NHS? And obviously, there's some real advantages to us as a regulator by being plugged in so early with them. So take point of care, for example, being then able to say, well, actually, you're going to need different modes of delivery for some of these future products. How can we make sure our other parts of regulation are very well aligned with that? So we certainly welcome your offer to be involved with that work. And it's certainly, I think, where our focus is too. But perhaps Louise would also want to comment.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, so absolutely, certainly with ILAP, that's absolutely part where you're bringing the payers in, the commissioners in at the point even before you've got into the phase 3 confirmatory trials. And so what they're, and I say speaking to my colleagues, it's very much about looking at the product, but what they're really talking about here is providing obviously advice and guidance because there are multiple routes to access those services and guidance on what those different access routes are. And I think really important facilitating engagement, not just with the commissioners, but also with the clinical teams and those expertise to really think about that point of care and that changes. And then obviously then informing that adoption strategy. So that's what we're trying to achieve here with the Innovative Licence Access Pathway. Much even before, say way before even we're getting anywhere talking about licensing, we're still talking at this point in terms of clinical trial development and getting them on board at that point. But yeah, it's a work in progress. I think it's going to be a continual challenge, but we are using these as good, hopefully, exemplars of that.
Thank you. Last comment to Julian, actually. One suggestion, but we need to
I would also look very carefully to say where it hasn't happened, right? I think that's where we're going to learn what we hadn't taken into account, even though we had those early interactions. I think we need to look at that and come back. Thank you.
Julian, briefly.
My point was simply going to be about system alignment, just making sure that the whole system, because we're looking at, with ILAP, phase 1, kind of phase 2 type products in the early space. So that's really where we're driving, and we've got to be looking similarly at phase 3 products getting to market, coming through. And that's really where we have to use appropriate tools at each level, but they've got to be fundamentally focused on system alignment between the main bodies involved.
Okay, really good discussion. Thank you, Louise, for coming and doing the presentation. We're as a board, we're really behind this, and I think we want to sort of really try and maximise its potential and learn from the pilots and learn from the feedback from industry and from our partner organisations. So lots of work still to be done. Thank you.
Very much.
Okay, we come on to the yellow card scheme now, and about increasing awareness. And I think Steph Milligan is going to join.
Steph Milligan's coming in. Alison's on the line as well.
Okay, and Alison Cave, our Director of Safety, is online. So welcome, Steph. So we're talking about increasing awareness of the yellow card scheme. To confirm if we're assured that the proposed activities will improve awareness of the yellow card scheme to make a difference to patients' safety, or there are other approaches that the board can suggest. So can I hand over to Alison and Steph to talk about this item?
Thank you. Shall I kick off? I hope you can hear me okay. And good morning, everyone. I'll give a short summary and then Steph can pick up any particular additional points. So the yellow card scheme, everyone is aware, I think, collects and monitors information on suspected safety concerns associated with healthcare products. And that might be a side effect to a medicine or a medical device incident. It remains the bedrock, really, of our vigilance operations. But of course, it's dependent on reporting from healthcare professionals, from patients and the public, as well as from industry. And so it's fundamental that we maintain awareness of the yellow card scheme. And this paper discusses some of the activities that are ongoing or planned and indeed planned activities around increasing that awareness. It sort of focuses on what has been done already to try and demonstrate what has been successful in the past and what we might do in the future. And in the future, we're focusing on technological solutions, but also continuing to work on local and national campaigns, awareness campaigns, educational campaigns, very much through medical schools, capturing individuals at the beginning of their medical school, of their training, before they get into the professional situation, so they're aware of the scheme, but also professional bodies. And the key point here, I think, is around how do we ensure sustainable awareness? And for me, I think, therefore, the emphasis probably should be on the technological solutions that we might make so that there's awareness at the point of an adverse drug reaction or adverse medical device incident being suffered, that the yellow card scheme is first and foremost in their mind. So I'll stop there. That's a brief introduction, and I think the paper sets out a lot of the activities.
Steph, do you want to say something?
I think that Alison has set that out very well. Obviously, increasing the awareness of the yellow card is key, and for us to have more reports is important for us to be enabled to identify safety issues quickly and then use that data and combine that with other vigilance data to take regulatory action. And just to emphasise the issue that although the awareness of the scheme has grown, particularly due to the COVID-19 pandemic, in 2024 we received the highest ever number of additional reports with over 100,000 suspected adverse drug reaction reports and 34,000 medical device incident reports. But we still have more to do, particularly in relation to reporting of medical device adverse incidents. And in 2023, only 1% of initial device reports were from patients. So clearly there is more for us to do there. And I think Alison has set out nicely everything that's in the paper to increase awareness and also to increase usability of reporting, which is also key. Additional funding and resources will be required to significantly increase awareness of the scheme and also to deal with the increased volumes and workloads. So the board's asked if the activities that are outlined in the paper will improve awareness of the yellow card scheme and if there are any other approaches that you would like to suggest. Thank you.
Thank you, Steph. I mean, clearly devices are a big issue, but with medicines, a lot of people, most people actually order their medicines now through the NHS app. Can you just comment on anything you're doing with the working with the NHS app to promote the yellow card scheme on that.
Alison, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that if that's helpful. Yes, that's a key ambition. We already have a link under the vaccine reporting area for the yellow card, but I think it's not as obvious as we would like it to be. So we are working with the NHS app in order to promote and increase the visibility of the yellow card reporting option through that app. There's a number of technological barriers to that, and we're working through that, including sign-off, privacy, etc. But that it's definitely an ambition as more and more people are beginning to use the app for their healthcare needs.
Yes, and I think you know, people are using the app more and more for repeat prescribing, and when they're thinking about their next getting their next medicines, they might think about any unwanted side effects that they'd had from the medicines, and actually it would be, you know, recording on that, I think would exponentially increase the amount of yellow card awareness. Paul.
Yeah, have we conducted any qualitative research on what would lead a healthcare professional to submit a yellow card and why in other circumstances they don't?
I'm not sure of specific research, certainly on that particular topic. Certainly we're working with some of the healthcare providers, and we specify some activities undergoing with EMIS. What we have seen is very different levels of reporting between different GP healthcare systems. And that's something we've been exploring, and we've noted that the visibility, again, of the reporting tool within the GP healthcare system might well be one of the reasons why we see differential reporting across those two systems. So we've been working with EMIS to increase the visibility of the Yellow Card app, and we have seen an increase in numbers. What we don't know, of course, is whether those healthcare providers, so I've seen a message on the chat, EMIS is one of the GP healthcare electronic healthcare record providers in the National Health System. So what we don't know is, of course, whether GPs were reporting through that, we're not reporting at all, or we're using our yellow card scheme to report. So that's something we're continuing to work through. I would say the only other thing that is a really interesting additional innovation in the yellow card scheme is a much more careful stratification of the type of healthcare professional who is reporting. So now we have the ability to stratify across different levels of pharmacists. We have the ability to look at, ask people to record around their hospital doctors, or whether they're working in different care sectors, as well as whether they're individuals working in the medical device sector, maybe engineers, or particular individuals promoting and using devices. So that is beginning to give us more information about who is reporting, and that allows us then in the future to target our educational campaigns and our awareness campaigns at particular groups of reporters who we may not be seeing reporting from that we would like.
So I would just encourage some qualitative research actually at the coalface with the people who are going to pick these things up, and probably sort of structured interviews, because one of the issues I think is what are the boundaries of yellow card. So I think if somebody develops a Stevens-Johnson horrible rash with a drug, it'll get reported. If something is just not working, so lack of efficacy, so many people are taking stuff that has got potential side effects but it's not working, does that get reported? There is, I think, a whole area where clinicians just don't think it's within scope that needs to be fleshed out.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, very interesting comment. And occasionally we see lack of effectiveness of a medicine reported, but it's uncommon. It's usually when there's been a clear change in that effectiveness.
Mandy.
On this, aren't I? I'm thinking at this from a different angle. I mean, when a company has a new drug, they put massive, or any product, a massive effort into marketing. Have we had a marketing strategy for yellow card, in the same way as you would look at you segment your users, you would segment the customers you're aiming at, to take a very commercial type view for this. And then the other piece is we also have ability to influence much more strongly. So how could you use a GP system for use unless it does have a reporting mechanism? You just don't, we legislate or we make it a condition of license with companies. Where are we using our levers? I think this is really good, but it's quite academic. Are we thinking about this in a very different way and taking learning from other sectors? So like marketing, and where we can use our powers, if you like. You know, the fact that EMIS have taken ages to put a yellow card button on, pharmacovigilance is a key part of patient safety and the doctor's, the healthcare professional's responsibility. It shouldn't be optional. So are we using carrots and sticks, and do we have a proper marketing strategy?
We got a marketing strategy for our brand. Alison.
Yeah, so shall I pick up some of those points? So first of all, I mean, it's interesting, we have done lots of marketing in the past, but what we find is that awareness, increase of awareness, isn't always sustained. So we see an increase in reporting, and we definitely see that when particular adverse drug reactions or medical device incidents might be reported in the media. So we'll see reporting in association with that increase in awareness of a particular reaction, but it's often not sustained. And so what we really need to look at is how can we sustain that activity? So we're doing a number of things around that. And the paper sets out some interesting local activities through our yellow card centres. And we have 6 centres across the UK, which are specifically tasked with increasing awareness and looking at local factors which might be preventing reporting. And we recently launched a centre in Northern Ireland, and they have done some really intensive work across the region and have seen very promising increases in reporting as a result of that work. So road shows, understanding local barriers to reporting. So that's one aspect, but very much the expense of really national media campaigns versus this targeted reporting and avenues where we can look at specific healthcare professionals who may not be reporting, look at the tools by which we may facilitate reporting, but also look at how we can contact and an individual or reach an individual at the point that they're looking to report, but the point they may be suffering an adverse drug reaction. So the paper talks about always on digital marketing. It talks about looking at promoting the yellow card through internet searches. It also talks about the possibilities of regional radio advertising, as well as more organic reaching out to media who we think will specifically help us in these activities. But I would come back to the point that what we need to do, and Steph raised this, is to really facilitate and ease that reporting, because I think that is a key barrier potentially to why we don't see as many reports as we would like.
Rachel, as communications chief, do you want to talk a little bit about marketing in this context?
Yeah, thank you. And just to say that we've run a number of marketing campaigns for Yellow Card over a number of years, but they have tended to be quite short burst. And as Alison said, what we see is that we drive up reporting, but then as soon as you stop the marketing activity, it drops off again, which is why we've been working with Alison's team on a rather different approach, which is around serving up the ability to report at the time when someone identifies they may have a reaction or a side effect. So it's when it's relevant to them rather than a sort of general driving up of awareness at times that might be less relevant. So there is a strategy. I think we're in the process of updating it to change that approach. I think the challenge we often have with the marketing part is being able to have sufficient funding to commit across a sustained period rather than sort of short bursts. But we're certainly doing a large amount with the resources we currently have. I think one of the questions for the board is whether you want us to prioritise that type of activity further, because I think we do a lot on the things we can do at no or low cost and through partners, but to get us to another level we probably need a bit more investment in that.
I think it's really important to know what works and what doesn't work. A marketing strategy isn't a series of campaigns, it's really understanding your audience and what works and what levers we put in. So I think that's what I was more aiming at rather than really thinking about. So if we have data on that, really understand what works, where we invest. And that, I think, becomes really important. And I don't get a sense of that at the moment.
Yeah, just to come back briefly on that, I mean, I completely agree, and I think it's about being very clear which audiences we want to drive up reporting in and of what types of things. So, for example, increasing medical device reporting could be an area that we really look at, given the figures that Alison has shared. And if part of our aim is that patient or healthcare professional audience on medical devices, we can then target that, do some testing on approaches that work or work less well, and then put our efforts where we're going to get most return. So I'm completely aligned in terms of, we can't do everything. We'll never have the resources to do massive, always-on campaigns. So it is about looking at where we want to increase and then targeting those really effectively.
I mean, I think going back to Paul's point, I think actually it is an area that medical professionals don't pay enough attention to, and I think we need to work out ways in which we can engage with the medical profession to increase reporting. But I think going back to my point about the NHS app, I think actually getting patients to self-report, it needs to be quick and easy, and actually at the time when they're thinking about their medication. Graham.
I mean, completely support the NHS app as being crucial, and it's great to see this being given the attention it is. I think it is obviously important for us, and we know it was one of the recommendations of the infected blood inquiry that this was given more focus. One comment. I mean, I think I looked for data on awareness and I couldn't really see any, and I think we're using reporting as a proxy, which is reasonable, but I think we need to be clear what we're talking about. And so I think there is a difference in that, and it goes to the points that have been made already about the bridge between awareness and reporting. I suppose my question is really about where do we want, what's good, and how do we think about where we want to be and why? And so that's what I couldn't quite get from this. It's clearly progress. We're seeing more reporting. It's great. And we've got 134,000 reports as far as I can see. But, what should it be? And why do we want it to be more? And I'd be interested in how we're thinking about that.
Also how this fits in with other forms of safety surveillance.
Well, that's part of the why. And so,
exactly.
So we assume more is good. It probably is, but we've already heard that different types of reporting are more useful. So should we be setting targets, and how should we be thinking about
that? Alison, did you want to come back?
Would you like me to come in on that a little bit? Yes. So we've been talking about what could be our North Star, if you like. Where would we like to be? And it's hard to set an actual figure on that. If we think through the COVID campaign, we got about 500,000 reports. And that was immensely useful to understanding the safety and effectiveness of that vaccine. Where would we like to be? We're at 100,000 reports. It's hard. In the past, there's been estimates that we only see 1 in 10 reports. If we're seeing that, then we would like to be tripling, quadrupling, even 10 times the number of reports that we currently get to ensure that we're really receiving all of the reports. That's probably not feasible, but if we could increase reporting 5-fold, then that would be a tremendous benefit in terms of identifying signals earlier, but also seeing changes in the sort of profiles of particular adverse events from medicines, or identifying trends in device reporting earlier. So I think it's hard to put a particular target on it. Over sort of the last 20 years, the paper shows the increase in reporting, but I think that with, Chair, as you've pointed out, the NHS app, we could be at a point where we could see a step change in that level of reporting with these technological advances that are coming on board.
So can I just briefly follow up? I mean, I think as this matures, I think we probably do need to be a bit more critical with ourselves about where we want to be, because we need the resource to do it and we need to argue for that. So, you know, I think a 5-fold increase would be fantastic, probably, but articulating specifically how that will help us, what that will help do in terms of protecting patient safety would be helpful in this, I think.
June, did you want to say something?
Well, certainly very much in the vein that Graham has talked about. In evidential terms, while we really value yellow cards, they are not a strong form of evidence. They give us a richness of experience, particularly from patients. But in terms of quantifying risk, it's not up there with studies. And now that we have the opportunities that flow from Cathy Sudlow's report to look at other data sources, but I very much welcome the point that Graham has made, that we should look at the various opportunities and look at the impact of each on public safety, and then try and play the tunes in a different way. I know that sounds a bit vague, but I think we're at a bit of an inflection point here, and rather than continuing to argue for more is better, that we should be quite discriminating about the resources that go in and the impact on managing and minimising risk. I think we are actually on the cusp of being able to do that. And while no one would ever say, let's not look at a yellow card, it's a hotline to us, and we appreciate each and every one. I think we should be much more scientific and analytical about where we put our efforts. And this never infinite resource, we can't ever have enough resource on safety. So I'd really recommend to new leadership moving in to do that very careful piece of analysis and do it reasonably quickly, actually. I think we can.
That's very helpful, June, and I think I concur with everything you've said there. Hader.
Thank you, Chair. There are a lot of things that have already been said, so I'll try not to echo them too much, but I'd very much support some sustained reporting on this. I think we've talked a lot about the NHS app, 34 million registered users, 1.2 million logins daily. It's the obvious public-facing means, and whatever the login problems were that won't talk about here and talk about online, it'd be interesting to just understand them better, because that has to be the workflow. And once people are aware of it, then we could fine-tune, June, what you were saying about the quality of the data coming in, and make it better. And in the same vein, the work with EMIS that's taken so long, I don't know if we have an API that these software companies can actually call. And, you know, I think somebody mentioned the carrot and the stick, then you turn it back to the suppliers to say, here is the method to log information. You must use it within the next 6 months or 9 months or whatever we give them, but really kind of try and make reporting easier for healthcare professionals using whatever systems where we benefit here from not too many systems out there, so this is fairly possible. And then somebody mentioned the marketing campaign, and you know, I was thinking about a rebranding exercise. When I first heard the name Yellow Card, it was meaningless to me. I was like, what are we talking about? Football. So, you know, a rebranding exercise coupled with a marketing campaign, and Rachel, you mentioned marketing campaigns. I wasn't sure if we'd ever done any on social media or whether they were actually, okay. And, you know, so I think those are pretty cost effective because they are repeatable. Once we've built them, there is obviously some cost to it. And I loved the Google search. You know, that's where everyone goes, right? Well, I've got a problem with this. So the first thing that comes up should be our, you know, would you like to log in with us? And I think some sustained funding for that kind of activity would be very well placed. And then the last thing, I think somebody mentioned pharmacists, and you know, there is some bad news around the pharmacists just recently, but I think focusing on how they can really help put the message out in their growing roles, I think would be highly useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Hader. Mercy.
Yeah, obviously we've had quite a few discussions on this in Patient Safety and Engagement Committee over the years, looking at things like health professional strategy, patient involvement strategy, all have impacts on the yellow card system. Just a few points. I think it is only part of the surveillance issue, as June points out, so we need to kind of see it in that context. Also realise that what patients do, they vote with their feet, so they stop taking the medicine if they think it's not, and they don't necessarily go back to the health profession to say that. And of course, there are now such a range of prescribers, so we need to think about health professionals as a whole, including pharmacists too. So it's part of a bigger issue. It's a real shame that the report once concept in 3.9 is stuck because of funding and things. So I agree with my colleagues kind of thinking about it in those kind of various ways. But I think the paper on the whole is trying to think quite widely about different ways of reaching different audiences. So I would support that, but also know that actually we don't have the resource to do a really kind of a big push on yellow card, which is an odd name anyway, and I think I've always said that people just don't relate to it in that way, and we do need to think about surveillance overall, and hopefully with the new kind of medical devices legislation as well, that we can think of a more emphasis on companies too, and on what they do to feed back to us things that they're picking up. Especially I'm thinking of UDIs, you know, the unique identifiers for medical devices and stuff. I have great hopes in that, as Cumberledge, you know, kind of recommended, that hopefully that we don't get the sort of issues that happened for people in the past, because we do have better ways of following through on medical devices, which, as we're saying, is a particular issue because very few are being reported at the moment.
Thank you, Mercy. Junaid. So maybe just to double click on a few things that Heather was saying. So I think it's really important that we meet people where they are, be that patients or be that healthcare professionals. And we don't want to add steps to an already cumbersome set of workflows. So if I think from a primary care perspective, if it's already on EMIS and it's one click away, it's really nice. But that click should be, I fill in a form inside EMIS. It shouldn't take me to a separate link to a separate web page with a bunch of other pages. It will just delay things and we won't get the engagement. So whatever we can do to make it really easy will be really, really important. EMIS is only one system provider, of course. We need to think about the others. And from a secondary care perspective, have we thought also about Cerner and Epic, so that, and we make just the whole process super easy? I was thinking, as everybody was talking, are there other nudges in the system that we could leverage? So have we ever considered how CQC could be a nudge? One of the big pillars of CQC is safety. So how many CQC inspectors ask about yellow card reporting when they go around, and should they be part of that? And if that was embedded at the top, imagine the trickle-down effect that would have across secondary care and primary care, and it's a constant reinforcing mechanism. Should it be part of the appraisal? So, Anthony, when you and I have to do our GP appraisals, we have to think about quality improvement. Should there be a section in there where appraisers are asking about, actually, do you get I mean, we all have to ask now about alerts from the MHRA. Should we also ask about, actually, how many times did you submit a yellow card report? And does that also fit into what we have to do for pharmacist appraisals and nurses appraisals? So the systematic effect of safety is embedded and everybody is talking the same narrative around safety and leveraging yellow card. And from a patient perspective, I do think the NHS app is great, but let's consider health literacy and also diversity of languages and the wider diversity we have in our population, and make it really, really easy for people to engage and meet them on their terms too.
Thank you, Junaid. There's some really good ideas there, Alison. CQC, appraisals, really good ideas.
Absolutely. And I think the health literacy point is really well taken, which is why there's no one path through this. And we have to provide multiple options in order to, as Junaid said, meet people where they are. But yes, some very helpful suggestions, and I certainly would take those forward.
Thank you. Last, Julian.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, is it something that we request to be more visible in the 10-year plan with the NHS? Because going back to that theme of disproportionate regulation, going back to the theme of looking at joined up landscape, it seems to be one of those key pillars of our asks of the system. We should be maybe make a more visible noise of that in that space as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much traction we've got in writing the 10-year NHS plan, but we certainly can feed into some of that. I do want to pick up on June's point, though. We need to be looking at other ways of safety surveillance other than the yellow card in tandem, really, and particularly using real-world data and proper analytical thought about how we're going to really solidify our patient safety system in this country. And I'll leave the last word to Alison.
Yeah, just
on mute,
just to come in on that point, of course, yellow card is one of the strategies that we have around safety surveillance. It's not the only one, and June has highlighted that nicely. We, of course, use our clinical practice research data link, which is our real world evidence, daily to look at and confirm and validate and explore potential safety signals further. We also, of course, use the literature. So we look at the literature and, of course, reach out to international regulators and other sources of evidence to understand better the context of a signal and whether it's being experienced in other jurisdictions. So yellow card system remains very important, but it isn't the only route that we have for safety surveillance, as well as, and I should also highlight that manufacturers are also continually doing studies in this space, and they report to us regularly, and we look at that information as well.
Thank you, Alison. That's a very helpful reminder. And, as June said, the Sudlow review and how we can maximise the use of data in this country for patient safety would be really good. So we do need to think about engaging with Cathy Sudlow, I think. Good. Okay, well, that brings us on to the next item. Thank you very much for coming, Steph. Next item's on the British Pharmacopoeia strategy. And I think Peter Crowley's joining us for this item, is that right?
Yes, and Suzanne Fuller.
And Suzanne Fuller. So, here they are. So welcome, Suzanne and Peter. You've got your name badges in front of you there. So for the public, it's Peter Crowley and Suzanne Fuller, isn't it? Suzanne Fuller, yes. So you're going to talk about the British Pharmacopoeia strategy, and the board's asked whether the strategy enables and supports the agency's future plans and life cycle model, and are there any areas which the Pharmacopoeia could increase collaboration with other parts of the agency and support the wider government priorities? So I don't know which one of you are going to kick off, but...
I'll kick off. I think the thing I want to say first of all is that the British Pharmacopoeia is a real success story for... Yes, can you hear me now? Maybe I'll lean in a bit more. Yeah, so the British Pharmacopoeia is a success story for the agency, and we've seen continued growth over the past 5 years as we've gone through a series of reforms and improvements. So the paper that you've got before you today sets out our proposed strategy for how we can continue to develop this asset in a way that supports and benefits UK patients here and at home and through wider global adoption, and also support industry and provide greater sort of global influence and maintain the MHRA's position as a globally respected regulator. So I'll hand over to Peter, who will take you through a bit more.
Actually, what I should do for the benefit of the public watching, do you want to Peter, just say a couple of line definition about what the British Pharmacopoeia actually is, because maybe some people in the audience won't realise.
Absolutely.
It's a recipe book, isn't it?
It's closer to an encyclopedia, perhaps. Encyclopedia Britannica maybe is a good comparison. It's essentially a collection of standards for UK medicines. And we've been in publication since 1864, so 160-year legacy, really. The standards that we produce define the quality of UK medicinal products that should be on the market. We continue to actually get great customer feedback, and we've got growing use year on year, so there's more people using the BP standards every year. That is only thanks to the small team that we've got of 16 of us, as well as the collaborations and support that we've got from across the agency as well. In order to maintain, grow that success, we recognise the need to continue to evolve in the changing landscape that we operate in. And on behalf of the BP Commission, who are an advisory, non-departmental body that are responsible for the British Pharmacopoeia, and in collaboration with the agency colleagues, we've produced this 5-year strategy, which really sets out how we plan to meet those changing needs. The primary aim of our strategy is to continue to better support our agency, to better support our country, and ultimately the patients that we serve. And in particular, I'd just like to highlight 2 key points from that. In addition to being a regulatory tool that supports the definition for the quality of medicines, our standards also act as a way to support healthcare access and Labour's prescription for growth plan. Where foreign markets adopt the BP standard, it ensures that the products in those markets meet the UK regulatory expectations. So this is, of course, great in terms of widening the pool of generics and biosimilars that the NHS can access and source from, helps to increase competition and so hopefully drive down costs for the NHS. Equally, where it's adopted in foreign markets, we know that UK generics and biosimilars are meeting the same expectations in those local markets, and so it acts as a tool to export of UK products and so UK trade. One of the unique attributes of the BP compared to other pharmacopoeias is how we're integrated with the national regulator, how we have access to and we can represent that scientific and regulatory excellence. We make best use of that when producing our standards, absolutely, but we've also looked at how we can support industry in other ways by producing non-mandatory guidance. The guidance that we've developed on the quality attributes of advanced therapy medicinal products is developed in collaboration with partners like the Cell and Gene Therapy Catapult, is helping industry and regulators to really create some alignment and forge consensus in what is a very complex and changing, evolving area. And they can act as a prerequisite to us developing standards in the future when the industry is stable. We're looking particularly forward to how we can apply that approach in other areas like mRNA vaccines as well as point-of-care manufacturing. And so there's a lot of work for us to do in the future there. But yes, both myself and my team are absolutely grateful for the opportunity to hear your thoughts on the direction that we've laid out in the strategy.
Right, questions for Peter? I suppose the whole area of personalised medicine is going to be quite a thing for you, isn't it, in the future, and how you're going to handle that?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's only by working with colleagues across the agency that we'll really come to a true position for that. But certainly, how standards can help support the introduction and the uptake of point-of-care personalised medicines is absolutely critical.
June, do you want to say something?
I think one of the challenges is timeliness of production of these guidances, as we talk about not keeping patients waiting, and in particular if we aspire to be the country where first off patent generics, new biosimilars get into healthcare without any unnecessary delay, subject to our legal advisors' views on patent life, etc. So what would your KPI be for having a monograph for every off-patent so that our industry is absolutely ready to produce what the healthcare system needs?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, the BP currently contains roughly 4,600 different texts for medicinal products on the UK market. Certainly looking at that first generics and the point there, we would obviously need to consider how we can bring that the monographs further forward to be able to support that. I think one of the kind of key things for us is how we work with some of our partners. We've had some great success with the United States Pharmacopoeia, for example, looking at informal harmonization of single source manufactured products. We can look to see how we can bring those further forward, as well as working with our colleagues at the European Pharmacopoeia, who have a process for single source products as well. I think the aim for myself would be that we were producing monographs for molecules 3 years before, is the ideal, 3 years before that market exclusivity runs out, which would help have a standard in place ready for the time that a manufacturer wants to develop analytical procedures to develop a generic product. It's an aspiration.
Thank you. Really important. James.
So I was just going to add, I think that point the Chair asked around the effect of, say, personalised medicines is a really important one for the Pharmacopoeia. So, you know, Peter referenced 1864. Going back even further, it goes back to King Henry VIII. So this is a product that has evolved and reinvented itself over time to meet the needs for patients and the healthcare system. So I think what you can see in what Peter and colleagues talk about in that paper is where we have these highly characterised molecules, a kind of traditional small molecule medicine. The BP has a very successful way of doing that. Part of what that team have been doing is saying, well, how does that evolve to meet things like cell and gene therapies, hence the work with the cell and gene therapy catapult? That's very much more focused on best practice around analytical standards. So the technology somebody would use both to measure within process, but also at the final point prior to administration for the quality of a product. So I think it's reflecting that change and accepting you're not going to be using the same monograph which you would use for aspirin tablets, which reflects, if we go back to King Henry VIII, perhaps they were measuring other things at that time. So I think it's certainly showing the evolution, and the team are very much focused on that. And what, to me, that does is make sure it's very well plugged into the agency's life cycle model. So how it could support upstream with innovation, but also with healthcare quality and access, providing those consistent quality standards which support the work of our assessors too.
Raj.
I guess the biggest challenge is keeping up with change. And I understand there's lots of discussions now going on. So at the advent of the mRNA vaccine during COVID, the WHO had to jump in very quickly and give its monograph and give you some of those details that you automatically pull in. So for example, the INN, which is International Non-Proprietary Name, is an important element. But I'm also hearing from outside that as they have more of it now, they're actually challenging some of these categorizations. So is mRNA considered gene therapy? So there's two schools of thought. How would you typically handle that in the agency? Because it is driven externally to an extent. It is also driven by the proprietary, by the people who own these products and have the mechanism of action. So it'll be good to get some insight. You know, do you follow a certain trend, or do we do our own assessments? It'd be good to understand just a little bit. Thank you.
So in terms of characterisation, and you referenced the INN there, the British Pharmacopoeia is also responsible for producing the British approved names. And so we're tied into that process. And actually the action and use statements that we use within the British approved names that tie through to the INNs are all then reflected back into the British Pharmacopoeia and the actual monographs that we have. So the categorisations kind of link all the way through. As for the other parts of the agency, I'm not sure I'm best placed to respond to that part.
Maybe June, did you want to say about that?
I think we can go further and maybe a bit faster to align. This publication comes a little bit out of sync with our corporate plan, but not to hold it back today, because I think there's a lot of very good aspects to it. But let's do a bit more internal work about maximising those opportunities, which are really there at this time. And they're there for public health. It's not so much selling the book, it's there to see the impact it has. And it's not just in this country, it's global impact. And Nicola.
Nicola.
Thank you, Chair. And just to say, I think as well that the linkage with the science and research and the physical biological reference materials is really clear. And we've enjoyed a very close working relationship with the BP, and I'm sure that will continue. Thank you.
Mercy?
Just to say, I like the sustainability and social responsibility section.
Well, I think Peter, everyone's very supportive. I think it's a good strategy. I think it's obviously a hugely important sort of national treasure. This document, this thing that you produce. So well done, and I think we'd like to carry on supporting it in whatever way we can do in the future. Thank you. Thank you. Good. Okay. Well, that comes on to questions now from the public. As mentioned in my introduction, this is a board meeting held in public, not a public meeting, and we will take some questions which are related to today's agenda. We received 14 pre-submitted written questions from the members of the public, 3 of which were related to the agenda. Those not related to the agenda will still receive a written reply outside the meeting. But Rachel, do you want to read out the questions, and we'll turn to the appropriate executive team for the answers.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And just to say, we've also had some questions posed as the meeting's gone on about the items on the agenda. Given that a number of questions are about yellow card, I wonder if it's possible to get Alison back on screen, please. Hi, Alison. So I'll start off with a couple of pre-submitted ones on yellow card. And the first one is about whether the MHRA can provide NHS organisations with monthly details of the yellow card reports from their specific organisation, as it would be very useful for the organisations to have sight of all the yellow card submissions for their area. The questioner also says it would be good to know basic details on submissions for other NHS trusts for awareness.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for the question. So we've touched on medical device safety officers and medication safety officers. So that's the terminology we're using there earlier in the session. And they do play an incredibly important role in interfacing between the regulatory system and the healthcare system. And we work collaboratively with these organisations during regular teleconference, and in fact we had an annual event just last week. So we are exploring how best we can share additional data on yellow card reports with specific NHS trusts, potentially through these networks. And we really do hope to, in the future, to begin routinely providing data on the numbers of yellow cards received from each trust. And what we can do is provide a breakdown of those reports. But of course, due to patient and reporter confidentiality, we couldn't share the full details of those yellow card reports. So yes, hopefully this is something in the future. We're working on this, and I hope that reassures the questioner.
Thanks, Alison. The second pre-submitted question on yellow card was about whether we were looking at the potential to automate yellow card reporting so that if a new drug or device is given, the system automatically reports a yellow card if the patient then arrives in the healthcare system with a new health issue.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question. I sort of alluded to in our yellow card awareness paper that we've done a substantial amount of work to try and integrate the yellow card reporting into healthcare systems, into their technological platforms. And what we have done is developed an information standard, which would then mandate the reporting, how the reporting is provided to us from primary care systems in England. And we're expanding that work across devolved administration. But an important element of a yellow card is that the reporter has a suspicion that that event was caused by the product, be it a medicine or a medical device. And therefore, can't be fully automated. We need that sort of individual input into that report. But what we're hoping to do is very much reduce the burden of that reporting.
Thanks. And then moving on to some of the questions in the chat. The first one was how underserved communities are supported with reporting, especially if there's a language barrier.
So yes, we continue to work with underserved, underrepresented communities within our yellow card activities. One of the things we are doing, and the yellow card has the potential at the moment to be provided in any language, as set up in sort of the internet translation services which are embedded in most web browsers today. So that handles that language barrier.
Thank you. The next question from the chat was whether the public can access the yellow card reporting system with live data in real time.
Yeah, so people can see what medicines are being reported, and they can see the sort of characteristics of those reports through our interactive drug analysis prints. And the lag time there is about 1 month.
Thanks. And the final question on yellow card. What benefits does the patient get from reporting a yellow card, and what should they expect in return?
So I would say there that the benefit from reporting a yellow card is at a population level. For all of us, our medicines are safer. So there is a population benefit from reporting on the yellow card. I think what we've heard feedback from patients is they'd like to understand better how we handle and if you like, the yellow card journey once it's been reported. And to understand better what happens to your report, we've created a new video, which the link to it is on our website and should be also linked to when you get an acknowledgement from submitting a yellow card report.
Thanks, Alison. So if we move on to another pre-submitted question, which is for Julian to answer. This one is about the publication of the information that all new licence applications received since the 1st of September are being processed within expected timeframes. The question is whether this means that the MHRA are prioritising applications submitted after the 1st of September over those that may be in backlogs.
Thank you for the question. And we have covered this a bit today in board in terms of what we're looking at, but I'd like to reassure that we're not prioritising new applications over backlogged applications, so that we have written individually to all companies with outstanding applications within the backlog recently, and some of them, a small number, have got major objections which do preclude approval at this stage, and they're going through CHM, our Commission on Human Medicines. And as soon as the outcome is clear from the CHM meeting, those will be communicated to the respective companies. We have put in place new communication routes, so just looking at how do we communicate, and with additional resources in that vein to ensure much more transparent communication. And as the numbers in our backlog have significantly reduced, it's a much more manageable way of ensuring that we have effective communication with companies. But thank you.
Thanks, Julian. And then final question that came in during the item on the innovative pathway, so that's for James. Will there be an industry advisory group for the innovative devices access pathway, as there will be for the innovative medicines one?
So thank you for the question. I think clearly having fora to engage with stakeholders is very important, especially in these more innovative spaces where we're developing new ways of working. As my colleague Louise Knowles talked through in the paper in an earlier item, we'll be considering the outcomes of the IDAP pilot, and that will then inform how we would build in any stakeholder group as part of our wider innovation pathways work. So there will be further updates on that in due course.
Thanks. So that concludes the questions from this morning.
Thanks, Rachel. And I hope those listening found the answers helpful. And as I said, I'd like to just reiterate those that didn't have their questions read out. We'll get some written replies to their answers. I'd just like to say a moment now before we conclude the meeting. I said right at the start this was my first public board meeting, but of course it's June's last meeting as she's stepping down as Chief Executive at the end of this month. And I'd really like to offer, June, my great thanks to you for quite an amazing stint at the agency. I believe it's nearly 40 years, so extraordinary public service. And June's really led the agency through some really quite tricky times. She's made a vital transformation in how the organisation takes a life cycle approach to regulation, and of course notable achievements including the first COVID vaccine to be licensed in the world, which is quite amazing given the amount of lives that were saved during that COVID vaccination programme. So June, I'd just like to really, I think everybody here wants to thank you so much for your incredible public service. You really have become a national treasure. I'd also like to personally thank you for, during my first 3 months of chair, being just so warm, welcoming and informative and supportive. So thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Anthony, and I hope I can just take the opportunity to say how grateful I am for the opportunities I've had and how touched I am by your kind words. It has been the most incredible privilege to lead the agency through some exciting times, through some challenging times, and I think to chart a way to an organisation that is much more agile and much more joined up, both internally and externally. And I think we have such advantages, as we've somehow touched on through this meeting, in terms of our talent, the expertise here, not just in innovative ways of thinking, and important though those are, but in the basic science and in the real world data. We are really astonishingly privileged with what we can bring to bear on the public health challenges. So there is a great future for the agency. I'm absolutely confident that the new leadership will chart that way forward, and that we will always have front of mind the patients and the public that we serve. Patient safety, as we've just been discussing, is paramount, and we mustn't keep patients waiting any longer than necessary for the products of this brilliant life sciences industry. So I'd like to finish with enormous thanks to the board, to all the colleagues, non-executive and executive, who've been so supportive and who've worked so hard to deliver our mission. Thank you.
Well, quite a moment for the board, this, and we'll work out other ways of acknowledging your retirement, June. So just to conclude the meeting, then the public meeting, that concludes the meeting for today, and I'd really like to thank everybody who's been watching the board meeting. Thank our staff in the agency who have contributed to these papers and supported the meeting. And finally, before I'd leave, I'd like to just remind everybody that the purpose of the MHRA is to protect and improve public health, and we do that through scientific innovation, access to new products, and most importantly, patient safety and surveillance systems. So with that in mind, I'll now close the meeting. Thank you for your time and have a really nice day.